Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I was getting some errors with YouTube, so let me know if you can hear me right now, because otherwise I don't know what's wrong. But anyway, hope you're doing well. It's been a couple days since our last stream. I was busy getting my ass kicked in Destiny 2's Crota's End raid. It's a lot more difficult than I was expecting, which is kind of a good thing, but due to some circumstances, I didn't have quite as a coordinated team as I would have liked, but it's all good. I managed to do like the first two encounters and then, yeah, Murder She Wrote. So anyway, now that contest mode is over, I will probably just like finish out the rest of the raid this weekend and move on from there. But anyway, what did we even finish watching last time? Let me see if you guys have been telling me I'm muted. Can't hear you? Okay. Trickster. Alright, so last time we did watch Bloodborne 8 years later, why it's still From Software's true masterpiece by Mr. Tomo Talks Games. And honestly, it was a little bit too positive for somebody as cynical and jaded as myself, so we stopped about halfway through. Then we transitioned into Soul Porpoise's Ode to Humanities, How Bloodborne Transforms the Myth. So today, I thought we would go back to some more Elden Ring stuff by looking at Hawkshaw's videos on the Ancestral followers. And we have two videos by them, by Hawkshaw that is. I think we should be able to get through both, and we might just run a little bit over. But anyway. Everyone, welcome back on in. Asnex, Chapes, Clownscum, Elden Enthusiast. Nice to have you guys once more. Alright. So, hope you're all strapped in to check out Elden Ring Lore, the Ancestral Followers, Parts 1 and 2 by Hawkshaw.
No one is that good. When someone's that...
You've been waiting to hear my opinion because I'm critical of Hawkshaw. I try to be, fairly critical of everybody, so yeah, we'll see. Alright, here we go. Let me just back up a couple seconds.
Good. No one is that good. When someone's that good, they're cheating. They have to be. The Ancestral followers are called Master Hunters, but accuracy like this is beyond superhuman strength or vision. This next level archery is beyond anyone, even Lars Anderson.
For real though.
The mystery of their archery and the answer behind it reveals a beautiful people and culture, and opens a window into some of the deepest secrets of the magical world of Elden Ring. Because this mastery is not strength, it is spirit. And these horned folk are much, much more than what they appear. So, big lore spoilers ahead.
And SNX asked, what's my preferred build in Elden Ring? Honestly, I don't really have one, but I have really enjoyed doing the one hand Frost, the other hand Bleed with the Scavenger's Curved Swords. If you put the Frost weapon, oh boy, in the left hand, you can apply the Frost effect before the Bleed effect if you're using like the Chilly Mist thing to buff the weapon, and it just kind of shreds things that are susceptible to both status effects. So in other words, Deathrite Birds still kill me. So Elden Enthusiast, you can't give Hawkshaw enough credit for these two videos. You needed them to help articulate some ideas of your own. Do you mind sharing any more?
When we first arrive in their area, we are limited by our first impressions. Every area in Elden Ring is challenging, so idling around and sightseeing, be it at the capital, the academy, or the mountaintops, is an enchanting idea, but it's not practical in reality, and a trip to visit the Ancestral followers has the same problems. Anyone visiting ends up panicked, running away from lightning bubbles that cannot be harmed, or dodging the attacks of the huge horned residents. Try as you might, some will club you to death or knock you down with arrows that hit even the most experienced Souls player. These are definitely not perfect conditions for lore sleuthing. Despite that, we all enjoyed these underground challenges, at least for the most part, as well as the profound beauty of the area and the boss at its end. Many have discussed the...
Yeah, so I don't exactly know why the ones down here are like spectral spirits. Let me back up a little bit further. So the ones below, like by the river area, they're like spirits. Weirdly enough, they can be slept and they can be bewitching branched. So I don't really know what's going on with them. Whereas some of the other summoned spirits by like the spirit calling snails cannot be slept or bewitching branched. So some of the mechanics of these things are a little bit weird in general. Elden enthusiast thinks it's out there, but they believe the one great is now the one, expressed as in God through all things through nature. With Radigan's Golden Order fundamentalism bringing the one through causality, or describing the one through causality and regression. Okay. Whenever Asenex visits a new area, they have to ask, what'd I do to you? Seriously, what'd your characters do in the past? Why are we universally loathed? Yeah, that's just kind of how FromSoft operates. Very strange to have an area or even an NPC that is non-hostile wherever you go.
Beauty of the area, and the boss at its end. Many have discussed the reuse of bosses in the game, but we felt, and we feel many agree, that we were very happy to see a second Ancestor Spirit boss.
I wasn't necessarily happy about seeing it, mostly because like it felt very underwhelming as a fight to me. Like there weren't enough differences between the first one and the second one to feel substantial. But with that being said, I didn't really mind that there was a reused boss fight because both were set up by like the totems and you could see their corpses and whatnot. Honestly, it was annoying having to do like both totem things for like each area, but yeah, maybe I would have enjoyed it a little bit more if like the first Ancestor Spirit was just normal without like having to light up all the sconces, and then the top one we had to do it or something like that. I don't know. Hey Jay Moore, welcome back in. Doing pretty well, how about you? Elden Enthusiast says, the Ancestral followers' pantheistic religion expresses the truth of the world, and you wish its horns grew bigger like in the cut content during the fight. I don't think I'm familiar with its horns getting bigger. Honestly, when I saw this thing in the trailer, and I was like, oh man, this reminds me of like the deer god in Princess Mononoke. So I was really excited when I saw it in the trailer, and then just a little bit underwhelmed in the game. And I did fight it early for what it's worth. It was just, yeah.
One of our first impressions was their names, the Ancestral followers, the Ancestral spirits. We also noticed that they were exceedingly strong and brawny, and items described them as such, just in case we needed to be told. They were obviously very spiritual, between the use of their magic, the object of their faith, and their unique dances and chants. Before they become aggressive, it is quite pleasant to pretend to be one of them, sitting by a group as they stamp around a minor Erd tree, or beside a shaman chanting a haunting melody. Next was how they looked. Their clothes all seemed to be made with the raw materials of nature. Leather sandals, fur, animal pelts. Their bodies are extremely tall and muscular, with long arms and small heads relative to their body. The Ancestral followers' ashes call them horned folk, and we find large horns upon their heads. The final first impression was of how in harmony they are with nature. They forage their food from nature, while animals crowd around them unafraid. What's more, the animals don't only go about their business, they often even follow the foragers during their tasks. Their tools and weapons seem to be made from plants or the corpses of beasts, clubs made from jawbones and bows made from horns, for example. They are hunter-gatherers, with a spiritual religion that seems to unite their approach. All of these first impressions made a pattern that seemed familiar. These first impressions, what we observed, the item descriptions, even their names, were some of the first entries in a note we labelled the Ancestral Followers, and we put this in a file called Cultures Before the Erd Tree. Then we moved along in the game, and we started thinking about some of the more apparent mysteries. Outer gods, the Erd Tree itself. What on earth is an Elden beast anyway? But we may have moved on too soon. The ancestral followers and the ancestor spirits are much more subtle compared to a lot of the game, but they are essential to the lore. This is because their culture is in many ways removed from and even opposite to the mainstream culture in the lands between.
True story. Also wanted to say hello to Corporate Nothing, Colo RPG, and Goddess Spaghetti. Nice to have all of you again. They sound like they're today's druids mimicking a cold religion. Why do you say cold religion specifically? They likely worshipped the early dynasty until it changed to omens. Yeah. Old religion. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I was like, is this like a Rani connection that I missed? Okay, it's all good.
In this video, we aim to show that if we can understand their culture, it is a shortcut to the fundamental rules of the world in Elden Ring. If Elden Ring's deep lore is a distant ocean, understanding the Erd Tree and the Outer Gods is akin to walking the great distance to the coast, where the ancestral followers provide a river. As we started to discern them, we seemed to move much more easily towards understanding, with greater and greater insights along the way. Both journeys can get to the same answers, but the ancestral followers might be a more tranquil route. So let's go downstream. Before we start on this journey, we just want to clarify that when looking at the inspirations for the Ancestrals, we are trying to show how the beauty of certain rituals and cultures in the real world may have helped From Software create a unique and compelling fictional world. No other comparisons are being made when we look at what may have influenced the Ancestral followers' culture. It's also important to emphasize that the video is not attempting to make value comparisons between different cultures or societies. Additionally, any observations made about the roles of males and females in the Ancestral followers' cultures or in Elden Ring are based only on what we believe is depicted in the game and the intentions of the game's designers. We have tried hard to be sensitive and respectful in our research, but we welcome any feedback or comments if we have inadvertently made any errors.
A little bit apprehensive when it's like having this amount of disclaimers for something like this. But anyway, Beans and Rice, welcome back to this stream. Jay Moore said, their cut content connection to the Lake of Rot is curious, and that brings living in harmony with nature's point into question. Yeah. The funny thing to me is also in like 1.0, they didn't really sing like they do now. They just kind of almost barked like really weird sounding dogs, which is just really funny to me. But yeah, the fact that they kind of got replaced by the Kindred of Rot down there is interesting. And it certainly would have helped connect them to the Ul and Erd dynasties, or old dynasties, whatever it's called in English, in that version of the game. And while you can still make those kind of connections now, it's just a little bit more difficult with them being in, not associated with like all of the little ruins down there. Tony Pepperoni, welcome back in. Alright, Elden enthusiast. Yeah, let me know when you're going to like release your video or whatnot. Or you asked me to like review your script and I still haven't done that. My fault. He wouldn't want to offend any cultures, you suppose? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so we'll see how this goes. And also welcome back in, Morlor.
The ancestral followers fell out of mind until we stumbled upon them again, this time above ground. But nonetheless, amidst more ancient ruins, they were yet again in a place that gave a sense of the ancients. Everywhere we ended up finding them gave this ancient atmosphere. We even find one wandering alone in the Lake of Rot, in yet another ancient realm of the lands between. This all, once again, gave the sense of a pattern of age. So, in our minds, the impression was becoming more fixed. They're an ancient society from before the Erd Tree. Possible inspirations from the real world came to mind. Peoples from the world over who had a culture on their native land before a new society arrived, eventually bringing war, until the newcomers became the primary power with a new belief system. Not only did the sense of having to flee and keep their distance from the Erdtree society fit this impression, but so did the aspects of the ancestral followers' spiritual worship. Ancient tribes all over the world hold deep reverence for antlers and the species that carry them, too many to list. Such societies were generally established before the intrusion of urban or literate societies. So, here was another ancient society before the Erdtree, just like the Beastman, the Nox, or the Dragons. However, we think we were wrong. Forgive us. We will...
Ruh-roh, Raggy. Kolo said, oh god, is he going to try to make the argument that they're new? I don't know. I could see arguments made for both, because they could just be, pun intended, like, squatters, but who knows. Earthmind, welcome back to the stream. And then he said, whether they're new or old doesn't matter. What does matter is that the religion is old. They're clearly connected to the dynasty, which is clearly connected to the omens. I would disagree that they're connected to the omens, but, yeah, that's a little bit beyond the topic for now.
Be wrong again, and likely a fair number of times, as we work to resolve the mysteries of Elden Ring for this beautiful community. But, on our replay of Elden Ring, combing through the game for details and insights, something struck us that we had noticed, but perhaps not understood. Their horns. What are horns famous for in Elden Ring? The budding horn is related to the crucible from before the Erdtree. Omen horns are evidence of something anti-Erdtree, and also share similarities to the crucible and pre-Erdtree era. Beasts.
And again, this is just a point that I will disagree with, and I'll probably just leave it for pretty much the duration of the video, because it's not going to be helpful for me to be like, oh, I disagree every time. But yeah, my opinion is that the Crucible is the Erdtree, the first version of it, created by Godfrey and Marika. That doesn't mean another tree couldn't have existed beforehand, but if so, I would say that that tree, if it does exist, was not the original Erdtree, and the Erdtree might have been grafted onto that. But even that goes a little bit far beyond the text for me to truly believe in myself, so I'm just kind of making this disclaimer here.
And dragons have horns. Old things in general have horns. So horns are very important across many areas, but more than most, the ancestral followers obsess about horns. They worship a multi-horned beast. They have huge horns sprouting from their heads. Horns are used in many of their weapons. They carry out rituals and pray for new buds upon these horns. Horns are before the Erdtree, and the ancestral followers have horns, so that's more evidence they're from before the Erdtree, right? Except the horns on their head can be dropped. Now, we knew this because we picked up the item, yet for some reason we didn't think they wore the horns. We thought it was just adapted as a drop for us as players to be able to wear the horns. But on analysing their models, their horns can be removed. Just like...
I'm a little bit surprised by this. Yeah, I didn't think they were actually horned like minotaurs or something like that. Anyway. Some of those are antlers and not horns. It's all good. I think they're just trying to lump in antlers and horns together because the distinction between them might be a little bit arbitrary. I'm not exactly an what's the word? Zoologist, but in general, similar principles perhaps. Kolo says, the omens probably didn't look like that originally. You can see pictures and depictions of a horned goddess, likely the formless mother. Wait, where do you see that? And you think the Banished Knights used to have horns on their armor? They still do. Like, it's kind of like the ringed knight armor in Dark Souls 3, where they should still have a little bit of like horns on like their elbows and on some of their shoulders, I think. And you can see that on the veteran set as well, a lot more clearly. So we got said, the Crucible being a primordial Erdtree is supposition from in-game evidence, but it's strongly supported position. Yeah, and a lot of this stuff does get a bit more... I can't say like really more clear in the Japanese, but in English, it's kind of made to sound one way, where the Crucible was like the primordial soup, mostly because of like the gilded great shield. But the Japanese is more ambiguous and makes it sound clearly as though the quote unquote primordial form of the Erd Tree is actually the quote original form, or sorry, just the original Erd Tree in the Crucible Knight armor set. So if the Erd Tree is the original form of the Crucible, or strike that, if the Crucible is the original Erd Tree, it makes it sound as though it should be like the first Erd Tree, because the Erd Tree is said to have been birthed in the war against the Giants. Alright, you'll link it on Discord? I'd appreciate that.
Us. So they do not grow them, they wear them, which got us to look closer and begin noticing more, such as their name, Ancestral Followers. This name feels so ancient, like the ancestral spirit, this majestic beast with so many sprouting antlers and its ethereal music. Yes, this is a beast from the ancient times, and the accompanying culture that worships it must be an ancient one. Except the word ancestral doesn't necessarily mean ancient. Ancestral is defined as of, belonging to, or inherited from an ancestor or ancestors.
True. Alright, let me pull up what Colo has. The Formless Mother? Oh no, this thing? No, I'm gonna definitely say that's not the Ancestral Mother, or Ancestral, not the Formless Mother, because this is the thing that shows up in Path of Exile. I think I have a screenshot of this somewhere. Or is this in screenshots? So this is mine. I know somebody on Reddit has it. Let me just look up. Path of Exile, Elden Ring Pillar. Alright. So this is the exact same pillar that you can see in Path of Exile, so I would disagree that this is actually supposed to represent the Formless Mother, and it's probably just a reused asset without a ton of actual lore significance, unfortunately. Although, if you still want to believe it's the Formless Mother, more power to you. I can't do it myself. And Ulcerated, I don't remember if I just welcomed you in, but welcome back to the stream. Show it closer. Oh, you want to see the Path of Exile thing? I think I just closed it, didn't I? Oops. Wrong video, or wrong window. I hate what they did with this new Reddit crap. Oh my god, this is the worst. Yeah, I'll just leave this for now. Let me just copy the image address, so if you guys want to save it and peruse it yourself, you can view it there. What about the rest of the images? The one that you shared? Let me pull that back up. Oh, okay, I didn't see that. You kept posting in there. So, oh yeah, the little lady on the Briar thing. I can't necessarily agree that it would be the Formless Mother, unfortunately. Why? Okay. Why? Copy. There. Yeah, so this is on the Briar set Greaves and some of the other stuff. What are the last two images from exactly? Because, I mean, to be fair, let's go ahead and pull up. I was taking a bunch of screenshots this weekend. And I don't think it's fair to just say, like, every depiction of a woman must be the formless mother. Oh, man. I opened the wrong folder. Hopefully I don't, like, lag out. Okay. And I haven't labeled any of these pictures yet. It's going to be a real pain in the ass trying to find it. Okay, here we go. So yeah, like here's like another woman with a child, but even I wouldn't necessarily say like that's the formless mother. It could be Belka, exactly. I'm missing the point because we find some of those images on the Dynasty and the Briar armor, so it doesn't matter if it's her because it still connects the Omen to the Dynasty. I wouldn't necessarily connect the Omen to the Briar armor, and even if they show like the which ones connect to the Dynasty, because none of those do. Like the picture on the pillar that's in the Halig Tree area in Elfile specifically. Morlore asks, why would Yokade be connected to the Ancestral followers and also be connected to the Omens and also connected to Elfile? Seems like it need a lot of substantiation. Yeah, that's a good point as well. Isn't this theorized to be the Bat Ladies? Yeah, that's a possibility, because like the Bat Ladies do also have like thorns on their feet, which is a little bit weird. And Titan, welcome back. I saw you earlier. Thematic observation about the Ancestral followers / the Omen is that antlers fall off and regrow. Oh, okay, that's cool. But horns do not. It could be seen as due to the removal of destined death. Omens were made and the horns can't die and fall off. That's an interesting point. Yeah, I mean, I obviously think that omens come after the Erd Tree because of Morgoth being the Prince of the Omen and the Omen Bairn effigies coming from the Erd Tree royal line specifically, but yeah. Of course I have a unnaturally high standard of proof, because, I mean, you can't prove it.
So in theory, something could produce offspring very quickly, such as a rabbit, and have many offspring, making it a very distant ancestor, and yet still do this during a relatively short lifetime. The European rabbit can bear young at 6 months old and lives around 9 years, so it could meet its own great, add another 10 greats and then some, grandson or granddaughter. So it is the relation of ancestry that is important, not age specifically. And we know from Elden Ring that relations are much more flexible than in our world. There are many richly nuanced relations that go well beyond just blood. The first impression of the word ancestral continues to unravel if we dig deeper. Such as when we find a shaman standing guard. And what are they guarding? Not an ancestral spirit body, but a chest. Something which stands out amidst all their natural ways. Guarding a chest containing a material possession in itself is already out of place from the rest of their culture that focuses on nature. FromSoft has always focused on themes of greed and possession, so for the ancestral followers to possess a chest feels almost taboo. In a culture which clearly lacks a firm system of ownership, be it property or land, they have one chest, hidden at the land's edge.
Has anyone ever seen The Gods Must Be Crazy about like this tribe in Africa who find a Coca-Cola bottle and it introduces the concept of like scarcity and possessions to this tribe, and they like start fighting each other for possession over the bottle because it was useful for like their crafts and it was pretty and a bunch of stuff. And so one of their tribesmen is tasked to throw it off the edge of the world. This is what this has reminded me of right now.
Beyond an archway, in a secluded room, guarded by a shaman. So what is in the chest that is so precious to them that warrants hoarding it away in secret? An ancestral infant's head. Skull of a very young ancestral spirit. Just think how many sproutings it might bear. It is young, new. It has no sproutings, or perhaps 2 if you count the tips it starts with. And yet, it is still called an ancestral spirit. It is hoped that it will bear many sproutings, and yet it is still called ancestral, further illustrating that the name ancestral is more about relation than time, becoming or creating a linchpin, a central node upon which to attach other things in relation. So, the name ancestral was yet another misleading illusion. The next thing that got us thinking was something that kept being repeated like an obsession in the item descriptions. The ancestrals are always referenced as being away from the Erd Tree's influence. They are always compared to the Erd Tree. The ancestral spirit is a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erd Tree. The ancestral followers live a distance from the Erd Tree, says Shaman Furs. This language is almost as though the Erd Tree and its society is a vital part of the locations of their settlements, as though it was taken into consideration. So, what if this deliberate referencing is because they were actually not so ancient, and had in fact left this modern society to return to nature much more recently? After all, Mog and his planned dynasty also lies deep within the earth, surrounded by structures from the distant past. But his dynasty is not ancient. And so, we believe that the ancestral followers are closer in age to Mog's new order than to the ancient beastmen. We then decided to really dig into the evidence of the timeline of the ancestral followers. The first damning piece of evidence that undermines their ancient past is nothing. Nothingness.
I would disagree, and you could say that their eschewing of metalworking should put them like somewhere on the timeline, but to be fair, I guess like metalworking was already being done by the time of like the Beastmen of Fair Missoula, but I do think that's like an important thing nonetheless, and I don't necessarily know if these things need to be ancient for them to be like separate from the Erd Tree, but for what it's worth, we do have that one line from America which tells the people to either become part of her order or stay like out on the fringes, and they could just fall into the latter category. Shouldn't matter too much there. But Stella, welcome back to the stream. Corporate says, when you hear a lore-focused creator unequivocally describe something in From Software games based on an item description, you expect me to pause the video and say it's an inaccurate translation? No, those ones are fine. Unfortunately, it's of course like the ones that stick out that are, as they say, like the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. So sorry you guys feel that way.
If they are so ancient, there should be some evidence in history of their interactions, their culture, their wars, or something. Instead, we find nothing about them in any weapons, spells, or items that reference the era before the Erd Tree. We find nothing in anyone's dialogue referencing them as an ancient people in history. We find nothing in any stories, whether in-game, in interviews, in guidebooks, you name it. Muriel, the greatest history.
Does anybody remember which cave or mine this is in specifically? Because I should get like a close-up of this chest. And I was actually going through this weekend and looking for stuff like this because I remembered finding one in the Rune-strewn Precipice. I thought this one might have been in Caelid, but it's definitely not. So actually it looks like maybe an Altus Plateau one. That could make sense. I'll need to... No. Yeah, the Cellular Crystal Tunnel one just has like the rot dudes and an empty alcove right here. The canvas one? Is that to the east, like by the Mirage one to the east, or is it south? Canvas Talisman Cave? Okay. I'll need to remember that one. Thank you. Yeah, and as Jay Moore says, eschewing metalwork is ambiguous to the timeline. It could mean they eschewed as metalwork became prominent or at any point after its creation. True. Hey, Alfarius Omegon, welcome back to the stream. It's been a minute. The thought of searching the caves for this sounds anxiety-inducing. Well, to be fair, when I'm just looking for lore stuff, I'll use the free cam mod and disable enemy AI, so I don't have to, like, focus on the little stuff. It's not a bad thing at this point, but you can never quite tell how common mistranslations are. The true Eldritch truth was first learning about Bloodborne's translation issues. Yeah. Now you've gained a little bit of that madman's knowledge, as they say.
Interviews, in guidebooks, you name it. Muriel, the greatest history buff in the lands between, makes no mention of them. We find nothing on any sword monuments. This nothingness is a terrible coincidence. Consider Stormvale, the Nox, or Farum Azula. With all of these, the fact that they were pre-Erdtree is revealed eventually. The pattern to this discovery is random and unpredictable, be it through subtle references, environmental clues, or even interviews with the developers. But somewhere, at some time, something is likely to show a placement in the timeline. And
that's kind of a weird statement to make. I feel like they're trying to prove a negative, or like use a negative as a proof of something, whereas I feel like you could probably make similar arguments about like the nomadic merchants. Like obviously they get rounded up eventually and thrown underneath Leyndell. However, we don't know what they were doing beforehand, you know, so how far back do they go? So, alright, moving on.
And yet, the Ancestral followers possess only one item that references any sort of history. What is this item? The Spiral Horned Shield, which says, once given to a tarnished warrior who cultivated close ties to the Ancestral followers. While this was no doubt a beautiful connection and a beautiful story, becoming tarnished was something that happened after the Erdtree. Once again, the Ancestral followers are referenced in relation to the Erdtree. Beyond that, the history of the Ancestral followers is blank. But what about their neighbouring cultures? They are close to ancient dynasties, and yet there is no evidence of any interactions. No warring with them, no indications they shared culture, no alliances, no intrigues or conspiracies, nothing. Another piece of evidence is the language used in the item descriptions, and anything else that describes their culture. This seems almost deliberate on the part of From Software. First, let's look at some items from other cultures for comparison. The Dragon Lord, whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time, is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erdtree. Two great rivers flow beneath the lands between, the Shifra and the Ainzel. The vast region is said to be the grave of civilizations that flourished before the Erdtree. In the time where there was no Erdtree, death was burned in ghost flame. Deathbirds were the keepers of that fire. The warped remains of priests who searched for revelation in service of the ancient dynasty. These are just a few examples. The pattern continues for other cultures, whether it's the Giants, the people of Zamor, or even the Onyx Lords. The language used does not try to hide the facts away.
Well, I don't exactly disagree with the points that he's brought up. I do think there's some significant cultural differences between them in that these dudes leave no traces of where they are or like where they've been, whereas obviously like the Claymen don't to a degree, and you might even be able to argue that the Claymen could predate the Ul and Erd dynasties. I wouldn't try to do that, to be honest, but yeah, I don't know.
Now, listen to these examples from the Ancestral followers. Ancestral followers' ashes, a spirit of the horned folk who eschew letters and metalworking. Or from the Jawbone axe, they disdain metal. Neither of these give us any time information. In other cases that reference craft, we can glean much more. The Beastman's cleaver says, "It's clear the Beastmen possess knowledge beyond human ken." This can implicitly tell us a lot, but for the ancestral followers we get eschew. Really? Eschew is defined as to deliberately avoid using, to abstain from. Not didn't adopt or gave up, not never learned or turned away from. No, they chose eschew. Hunter-gatherers could eschew technology as it came into existence, but so could we eschew using computers today. And when it comes to the ancestral followers, this ambiguity is all we get.
And since we have some questions in the chat, yeah, the Japanese is consistent with this. They use like a hitesuru, which is to deny or like repudiate these like culture and metallurgy, I suppose.
Or silence. But is that just a coincidence? With FromSoft, we think not. Let us now look for horns other than the headband. What do we mean? Well, it is repeatedly mentioned that the ancestral followers are obsessed about buds, which is, unsurprisingly now, somewhat ambiguous. Does it mean animal horns? Or the buds of plant life? Either way, once their headbands are removed, we cannot see any sprouting buds of any kind. Even if we remove their garments in the game files, we see some impressive muscles, but no horns. If they were an ancient people and had been hoping and chanting for new buds through the ages, shouldn't they have appeared by now? Even Mog's Albinorics have developed some. And yet, there are none. Some can drop a budding horn, but we wonder if this is harvested from other beasts, just like—
Yeah, and that was something that I've thought for a long time, or I still do think it, that the budding horns don't necessarily grow on these people, which I think some people take it to mean that the ancestral followers must be Crucible era type beings because they have these horns when you kill them a lot of the time. But I don't necessarily strictly believe that, and I do think that they're harvested from other beasts like deer and stuff, because they also drop like deer bones, I think. But anyway, I did actually look at the ancestral followers' ashes, because this kind of stood out to me, because when I said like they oppose culture, that the term in Japanese, as far as I'm aware, is just civilization and culture. I don't know if this is like a one of those things that extends beyond like the literal meaning, and like civilization in Japanese kind of explicitly means that it's tied to the written word or anything along those lines. So I'd probably need to do a little bit more research on that for now, but just keep in your mind, it might not actually be like letters that they issue, which is kind of a funny word to just keep repeating ad nauseum.
like the pelts they wear. If it is theirs, it is still quite limited compared to their hopes, or what other recent dynasties have achieved. In fact, the language around this hope reflects its future obsession. They are certain to sprout from their very flesh. They are certain to implies a future event. It hasn't occurred yet. Indeed, this language sounds a lot like the language used for the Mogwin dynasty. Glory to his inevitable reign, the reigning lord and hierarch of the coming dynasty of Mogwin. Language.
And that one is kind of similar in Japanese. I feel like the Blood Rose is a little bit one of those descriptions where you kind of need to just take it as not a limited, well, omniscient as more as it is like a an expression of an opinion that isn't made explicit. The Japanese is like a little bit softer, where it doesn't like say like glory to the inevitable reign. It's more like glory to the reign that should be, essentially, but it does kind of have that meaning, so I understand why the localizers translated it that way, but it's slightly softer in Japanese. Yeah, so I also looked at the native dictionary, and it just says it talks about like people advancing to the point of having like religion, morality, and like learning, but it doesn't necessarily seem like it has to be related to letters for issuing Or, yeah, for Bunmei, whatever I'm trying to say right now. Alright. Alright, going on with the video.
Obsessed about a future of a relatively young order. With the horn headband removed, they are certainly not beast-like in other ways. They wear sandals to walk on the ground, showing their feet aren't fully adapted to nature. They hunt
Yes, the Miyazaki footlore.
with bows and build quivers and axes, showing they use tools. In Elden Ring, it is ambiguous what exactly constitutes humanity. However, in a colloquial sense, they are certainly human or human-like. Importantly, they are never called demi-human, beast-like, or less than human anywhere in item descriptions or dialogue. They may be somewhat different to human. After all, everything changes in this world relative to the magics or natures things come into contact with. Just look at the possible rot versions of the Ancestrals that were cut, or the sorcerers we find who have turned inorganic. Many of our starting classes as a Tarnished have
I actually want to look at that one a little bit longer. Okay.
who have turned inorganic. Many of our starting classes as a Tarnished have quite distinct takes on humanity, so we can say that overall they are certainly at least very close to human. After all, we would expect a significant change if a group followed a totally different lifestyle over many generations in the lands between. So we feel that they are human anatomically, even if there has been some adaptation over time, and that this adaptation could easily have taken place in a timeline that started since the Erd Tree. Sometimes the attractions of nature are strong, but if you don't want to leave things totally up to nature, then you might be helped by this video's sponsor, Manscaped. Manscaped offers the best kit for sorting out the zones that let a master hunter know you are upwind. Your body, your butt, and your twin
maybe these aren't auto
balls.
captions, they're like the real ones?
Manscaped dropped us a bunch of stuff
Yeah,
in their all-in-one perfect package 4.0. First is the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, and trust us, Manscaped skin-safe technology ain't no sorely diluted golden order generation tech. It reduces
See, this is the wrong sponsor because this has metal, and the followers don't be manscaping.
nicks and cuts on the most sensitive regions of the body, as though it was truly guided by the magic of runes. Also included are 2 products for those who worry about the fading of their lands between. The Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and the Crop Reviver Ball Toner Spray. Simply apply the Crop Preserver after your shower for all-day body odor protection. The Crop Reviver is a convenient spritz with cooling aloe vera, the technical name for dew-kissed herba, to quickly refresh the area whenever you need it. For a limited time, you can get all this plus 2 free gifts: the Shed Travel Bag and the Manscaped Anti-Chafing Boxer Briefs, and free international shipping by using our promo code Hawkshaw or clicking the link below. The perfect helper for anyone hoping to become ancestral.
What? Feels like they'd be the opposite.
Another clue to their timeline is where we find ancestrals and evidence of their culture in the lands between. Remember the language that obsesses about being at a distance from the Erd Tree, away from its influence, beyond the purview of the Erd Tree? So let's think about this approach if the ancestral followers were truly ancient. What happens to those who possess an ancient culture when it is disturbed by newcomers? Consistently, across many countries throughout history, land is taken. To this day, there are many land disputes involving indigenous peoples who in the past were forced to relocate. A more well-known example in history was the Trail of Tears, during which thousands of Cherokee...
Hey, I don't like this section of the video with this guy talking with this kind of accent.
Muskogee Creek,
about this kind of
Seminole,
history.
Chickasaw, and Choctaw people were forcibly removed from their homes.
What about
this
India?
Was in the early 19th century,
China.
And was sanctioned by the US government, who had passed the Indian Removal Act. This authorized the forced relocation of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States to Indian territory. Of course, if a people have changed location, there is usually some evidence of their departure in history, and in the lands between. We see this in-game in several places, from Faramazula and their beasts taking to the skies, with remnants of the culture still grounded, or the Nox banished from the surface to deep below, yet the evidence of culture lives on up above. Whether deserted or taken over,
I think it's really funny that they said culture exists up above when just moments ago on the stream I was saying like the ancestral folk eschew culture as well as metallurgy.
can always find evidence of what came before. If the ancestral followers had been part of an ancient culture, and only avoided the Erdtree after it became the centre of the dominant culture in the lands between, then there should be locations from which they were forced out. What we mean to say is, if for some reason the people or philosophy of the Erdtree society means that the Ancestrals need to keep a distance from them, then wouldn't there have been some Ancestrals that needed to move from an old home? And if they were originally part of the Erdtree society as ancestral followers, and chose to distance themselves from it, then there would be evidence of their movement. But in the lands between, we find no evidence of their relocation. Nothing that correlates with the ancestral followers' culture is found in places that they are not.
And of course, this is also relying on the idea that the ancestral followers are not like the remnants of the Ul and Erd dynasties, but I digress.
We only find evidence of the ancestral followers in the places where they live now. We do not find any evidence of the replacement of rule, as in Stormvale, or of departure, as with Beastmen. What if we look at what we can find and examine the sense of ancient in them? One of the first things that makes us feel their antiquity are the pillars we light to access the ancestral spirits. We believe these pillars date back to the ancient past and are part of an ancient dynasty which existed well before the Erdtree. These pillars, as well as the iconic statues often found with the Ancestrals, give the followers a general impression of age by association. But in fact, that is all it is: association, or rather, adoption. These columns.
And I do think Hawkshaw's claims about their lack of historic traces is severely weakened by comparing their situation to the nomadic merchants, because they don't have a left behind historic relic or town or anything like that. And I think that's because they're nomadic. And I think the ancestral followers give the impression of being nomads, even if like they're kind of relegated to a couple areas in the games.
Are not of their making. They have taken these columns from older societies. Why? We will look into their belief system in a moment and show how many of their beliefs may align with the belief systems of older cultures. But first of all, let's take a look at the evidence for when. We find these pillars in many places in the lands between, but these places are connected with societies we know to be older than the Erdtree. There is one notable exception, where we find Mog, but Mog has also used ancient artifacts for his new dynasty, a dynasty that departs from the Erdtree. So the physical pillars used by Mog are also exceedingly old, and all these ancient pillars are fairly similar. They have the same markings, drawings, and runes. They have the same proportions, are roughly the same size and shape, and are made from similar material. However, those of the ancestral followers have two noticeable differences. At the bottom and top of their pillars are two alterations. To allow us to light the pillars and gain access to the ancestral spirit, we light a basin at the foot of the pillar, and at the top is a remarkable change. There is a small well carved into the stone, from which flame can emerge. There is no stone with a carved well at the top of any other such pillar throughout the lands between.
So more lore says they don't think the ancestral followers give nomad vibes. I get that. I think part of the reason why I feel that way is because they seem to be more scavengers, like grabbing like berries off of bushes, and they don't seem to have truly adopted agriculture, which to me, in my mind, kind of necessitates a semi-nomadic lifestyle, which is I think kind of a limitation of what the game can allow, just because like the areas, even though like the whole game is really big, each area is pretty small and fairly self-contained though. Yeah, you're kind of warming to the idea that they live along other civilizations and that it has merit. I think it's possible as well. I'm just kind of curious where the rest of the video is going.
Other than by the ancestral followers. As well as it being altered, it almost seems that the stone is of a lighter, newer colour. On closer inspection, the carved basins have a pool of oil, which explains how they stay lit. Finally, and something that really pins down the Ancestrals as after the creation of these pillars, is the fact that we know the ancestral followers eschew letters. But what is on the pillars that light up clearly with magic? Runes. Letters. If these people have never used letters, they could not build these pillars. But more importantly, it would go against their fundamental beliefs. These pillars are not their own, and the reuse of the monuments of more ancient cultures shows their true story. The story of a more recent return to the past, not an ancient society's rejection of the present. So
yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that whole idea of them not knowing to use runes and whatnot because of like the whole eschewing letters, even though the Japanese says that like they eschew civilization, because those things would kind of go hand in hand there. But anyway, Bella, welcome back to the stream. You didn't know I was live. What did you miss? You missed clicking that beckoning bell notification to know when I go live, apparently.
this is the timeline of the ancestral followers as we see it. At least, so far, as their timeline isn't over. It's clear that they have a future, because their system seems to be working. Who knows, they may have a future that involves more than keeping a distance. The weapon Winged Greathorn says it is made to reap the lives of beings which experience no sprouting. Perhaps, with enough life and enough sprouting, the ancestral followers could be a force to be reckoned with. In time, they might not be so reclusive, but instead a warlike people, striving to rid the lands between of all distorting manipulations of nature. With their timeline established, we will take a deeper look at their culture and gain a deeper understanding of what the followers are all about. Now that we know they departed from the Erdtree society in their past, it makes sense that we find in the present that distance from the Erdtree is still of vital importance. We never find them too close to the Erdtree, and the majority are even underground. It seems that the Greater Will and the Erdtree Society fail to pierce underground as effectively as they influence above. The Sites of Grace themselves are not able to draw grace into them like they do on the surface. Below ground is also where other societies that have not aligned themselves with Leyendell have managed to sustain.
I think that's an interesting point about the Graces below ground not pointing to other things, and I would need to think about that more. I would just kind of take it like at face value that they don't really point to anything because they kind of are all, what you call it, like pretty self-contained areas that are fairly linear. So I wonder if that's true of other places like the Legacy dungeons. Yeah, I don't think they point ahead different spots like Stormvale, Raya Lucaria, or like Fair Missoula. So maybe it's just not that important. I don't know.
And below the earth may be more than it seems in the lands between. The culture they nurture here, away from the danger of the Golden Order Crusaders, is deeply connected to nature itself. They sustain their bodies from nature, hunting and gathering. Their clothes and tools are from nature. Their worship is of a creature of nature. They have a faith in nature, that nature is abundant and will always provide, so long as it is treated with care. And while nature is balanced, it is also dangerous and powerful. It must be respected. And part of that respect is trust. Nature must be trusted despite its afflictions to be the best system there can be. These hardships are necessary, even if the why is mysterious. To believe nature can be modified or outdone risks invoking the wrath of nature, and may corrupt or even defile the great generator, the universal mother of life itself. This respect in nature runs through everything they do. Not only do they take what nature furnishes when foraging or hunting, but they do not waste anything. They use many parts of the carcass. They dress themselves with pelts. They arm themselves with horns and attach teeth to their arrows. And the animals they hunt are unafraid of them, which means they do not hunt recklessly. They chant to all the nature around them, not only for their own ancestor spirit. The mirror of these traditions rooted in nature is a rejection of techniques that go against nature. We are told by the ancestral follower Ashes that they have rejected certain crafts that are essential to other societies in the lands between, specifically letters and metalworking. On the surface, letters and metalworking sound similar to crafts in our own world. Both are of great importance to the function of society, but in the lands between, these carry much more significance. Let us first address metalworking. Metals have some important roles in the lands between. Gold, first of all, has a remarkable quality, and metalworking with gold allowed Mikola to stop the progress of rot in his sister, Melania. Copper can channel the will, allowing swords to fly in deadly arcs by thought alone.
Hey guys, last protagonist here, letting you know that copper in this instance might not actually be copper, and it could just be red gold.
But if we have to choose one example of metalworking to illustrate what the ancestral followers are giving up, it would be silver. Because how do we birth ourselves anew? With a larval tear, the core of a silver tear. Silver, or what we might call quicksilver, is very linked to rebirth in the lands between, the renewing of the soul in another body. While this may happen naturally, as colours and elements in the lands between are of course naturally occurring, metalworking is the manipulation of these things. It is the imposing of your will onto the naturally occurring essences of nature. So the ancestral followers do not merely reject metalworking in the sense of our world, but they reject metalworking in Elden Ring. They reject control over rebirth and life. It is quite a power to ignore, and is just one illustration out of many metals. This demonstrates the unwavering faith the ancestral followers have in their belief system. The next craft the ancestral followers reject is letters.
So, is he trying to say that they were working with silver? Because that seems contradictory to the idea of it being like a metal and that being something that they eschew still? Or is he just saying that they're like silver? Because I was thinking, since we don't actually have any ancestral spirits above ground, that the ones below ground might be partially the product of lacking sunlight. And I wonder if that plays a role in things, because even the ones above ground, their horns don't glow, but the ones that are like corporeal down below here do have like the glowing horns, but not like the spirits. Hey Crunchy, nice to see you again. Some places say Akagane, red gold, and while others say Do. And those are technically two different characters. So, at least for the weapon, the Blade of Yokade, it is Akagane, most likely, because it doesn't use the typical character for copper. He didn't relate any insinuation to silver? Okay. It was just weird that he like brought it up, other than just like a Because, I mean, he did talk about the Nox and the Silver and, like, Rebirth thing, so maybe it's just, like, more of a principle thing, which is what I thought he was going with, but I didn't know if anybody else was getting a different vibe. They probably glow because their source of power is underground? Maybe. If they hit you, the horns glow? Oh, okay, cool. The ones up top? I'll need to look at that. Let me make a note of that, actually. Also type in Gale Tunnel. Gale Tunnel and Ancestral Followers. Horns above ground glow when hit. Alright, good enough for me. Okay. He used silver as an example of the power they were not using. Okay. Thank you. I might have zoned out.
Once again, in our society, a rejection of letters would still be very significant. It would mean a loss of a great part of education, entertainment, communication, and so on. To be illiterate in the modern world is extremely challenging, yet this significance in our world again masks the even greater significance of this craft in the lands between. To reject letters in the world of Elden Ring means even more. To reject letters means to reject the power of runes. One cutscene in particular can clearly and elegantly demonstrate the sheer power of runes.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting argument. Obviously, I think it might be coming off a little bit too strong with the whole idea of them eschewing letters specifically, because we don't know if like the Great Rune type runes are still technically letters, but that might be a different thing relating to like the whole culture thing that I was mentioning. But I'm interested to hear more. Like, a part of me is a little bit apprehensive about it because when you kill the followers, you still get runes and stuff, and it could just be a fact of like the runes being kind of disseminated everywhere, and it's not really their fault. But interesting idea that they would not want runes either.
Climb into a humble coffin beside the waterfall in Nokron. We surprisingly start to rise, and we can see the reason. Letters, runes appear in the air, unlike when they are bound up so deeply in rings as to be invisible. We rise up the whole height of an enormous waterfall, reversing for a time the encompassing power of gravity. Runes are quite literally a power to affect and influence the laws of nature themselves.
Yeah, Morlor was saying that runes are letters literally. I agree with you in a broader context, although I'm not so sure about Elden Ring specifically, partially because Ronnie had to steal a fragment of the Rune of Death to imbue the Black Blades with death, rather than her just carving a letter that essentially meant death onto those daggers themselves. So I do wonder whether or not the runes that are like the Great Runes aren't technically letters in a literal sense, and if this is more of like a weird fantasy setting type thing. But yeah, that's why I'm not like totally on board, but otherwise I would be. And without horns, welcome back to the stream. A good video for you to hop into because we're talking about ancestral followers and their horns. Spaghetti says, this is brainstorming, but the followers underground seem like they're achieving some Buddhist form of unity with their ancestor spirits. They're less corporeal compared to the ones topside. So, what do you think about the ones on bottom by the riverbed compared to the ones in the middle between like the Nokron and the like aqueduct? Just because they're letters doesn't mean they're only letters necessarily in all cases. Yeah, and so that's kind of what I'm like trying to grapple with here with this video so far.
In this example, it reverses gravity. Runes can control the flow of these laws and change it depending on your whim. Once again, we see the enormous devotion of the ancestral followers to not make use of this power, and the deep commitment they therefore have to their own beliefs. Both of these rejections show that their belief and culture revolve around a faith in nature exactly how it is. a trust that nature will provide for them, and through that, a profound humility. They do not believe they could improve nature, and will not attempt to change it. This philosophy is not only shown in these consequential rejections, but even in the smallest details of their most simple crafts. It seems that they not only reject metalworking, but any sort of sharpening. They use a blunt axe, the jawbone axe. The whole axe is furnished by nature. It is meant to be that way. So they reject the possibility of sharpening an edge. The weapon forgoes a bladed edge. Their arrowheads seem to be made from teeth, which are naturally sharp. Nature provides what is needed. If nature furnishes something sharp, it is meant to be used for its sharpness. If it furnishes something as blunt, then it is meant to be used as such, in the jawbone's case, as a bludgeoning weapon. They show in their actions their belief that nature provides what is required. Another set of items that reveal their belief system are their charms. We have established that colours and their natures are inherent across cultures in our colour video, and how, whether it is the Ancestrals, the Erdtree faction, or dragons, these colours maintain their nature. What is interesting is that amongst the ancestral charms, only one is mentioned as being precious to the followers. This is the mottled horn charm. In fact, this charm is the only horn charm given the honour of being worn as a necklace, so the item is uniquely called the mottled necklace. This vividly coloured necklace has many colours and therefore many natures. It shares natures related to focus and sleep, immunity and poison, robustness and vitality, the fire of life. This sort of varied coloured item would not be so welcome in Erdtree society, and the only people we find in Leyendal who wear many colours are buried deep below the capital. This is a sign of the plurality of the ancestral followers' beliefs, their openness to all that is found in existence, if it occurs naturally. If it is natural, trust it, even if things are in opposition to each other, even if they cause pain or loss, even if they compete. Unlike the belief in one true God that is held as
Titan made a funny joke that the ancestors are hypocrites. What about the holes they put in their skin? Nature doesn't want that either.
law by the Erdtree society, the Ancestrals are pluralist. Not only do they worship the many competing aspects of nature, but they even allow natural competition as part of their very system. After all,
Okay, wait, it does look like there's a little bit of the silver stuff on these ones' horns, so I might need to look at these guys up top. Wait, no, yeah, that one still has silver horns. That's interesting. Okay.
even allow natural competition as part of their very system. After all, we fight more than one ancestral spirit, but only one is a king. We can guess that one may be up and coming in spiritual power, and yet they do not deny the existence of this other ancestral spirit and help its growth. They take this even further with the deep care and attention they give to new potential ancestral spirits, chanting young heads into new buds. All life is allowed, and there can be more than one vying for place. The strongest will take the crown. This strength wins approach as a belief is a much more ancient one the Erdtree society has moved away from. Here, in the culture of the ancestral followers, they have returned to this belief. The true king is the strongest.
And again, I would disagree that the Erdtree was initially against strength, because that seems more like a Godfrey thing, but I do believe that they moved away from that when Radagon especially became Elden Lord.
Now that we have laid the groundwork of their culture, let's have a look at their broader place in art. While the ancestral followers' culture, design, and history is unique to Elden Ring, they seem to be part of the wider shamanic archetype. Whether in mythology, real history, or Magic the Gathering, From Software has placed the essence of the shamanic archetype in the soul of this group. This archetype.
Alright, screw it. I was thinking about making a post about this on the Discord, but I kind of want to play Magic again. Some Commander, I've got some decks. So if you guys are interested in Magic, I might play a couple of games next Sunday or something like that. And hit me up on the Discord and I'll probably coordinate something.
Type, whose philosophy is found in reality, and frequently in mythology and artistic works, usually presents corresponding beliefs to the ones we mentioned earlier. Faith in nature as the greatest process, faith in its abundance despite its harshness, and a respect to not tamper with it, because without these processes, all would perish. This archetype has many representations in art, whether as wood elves, fairies, druids, or representations of shamans in works that inspired Miyazaki, such as Magic the Gathering. And they all are always absolutely minimal in the damage they cause to their environment. Their actions and their tools go with the stream of nature. And one process at the very core of nature is death. All shamanic belief systems respect and value this part of life as a process. It is one rejected by the Golden Order, and as we become more familiar with the Ancestrals, we can see that the life-death cycle is central to their beliefs. How essential life and death are as a part of a complete whole is best shown from the ancestral spirit's horn. Thus does new life grow from death, and from death one obtains power. This acceptance of death as a part of life is perhaps the most important thing that defines the way of life and belief system of the ancestral followers.
Yeah, I will definitely hard agree with that, and I think it has some of the most significant lore implications in the entire game. And this isn't necessarily limited to the ancestral followers, although maybe now that I think about it. And I was going to say Poison Mist and Poison Armament also mention life sprouting from death. And initially I would say, that doesn't really align with the ancestral followers, which is kind of true. But in 1.0, when we had all of those ancestral followers down in the Lake of Rot, it would have been a little bit of a stronger tie-in there. But anyway.
They reject any attempts to control life and death. There is no avoidance or interruption of it. It is welcomed and embraced. All of nature's systems are respected, but this system, more than any other, is sacred. Given that natural death has been rejected from the current order, with the Rune of Death sealed, this may also help with their timeline. Their focus on the importance of the natural life-death cycle makes it likely that the ancestral followers left mainstream society after the Rune of Death was sealed. This belief can be found in everything, what they wear.
So more lore said, ancestral follower stuff also seems to have connections to Ghostflame. If I remember correctly, their spirit-dwelling arrows don't actually inflict frostbite, so I think it's technically separate from Ghostflame, but I will need to double check that.
What they use, even expressing itself on their faces, almost physically embodying this obsession with life and death. Not only do they not alter what they take from nature, but so much of what they take is from death. They give new life to a corpse by using it as a weapon. From death comes power. The teeth made for their arrows are from death. The jaw worn around the shaman's neck is from death.
Alright, and I think now I'm also a bit curious about how Hawkshaw thinks about the timeline, because if he believes the shamans came from an era before death was sealed, then if he believes the removal of destined death happened when Godfrey and Marika came to power, then that would still put them pre-Erdtree, would it not?
Their coloured charms are from death. The horns that make their bow are from death. From death comes power. They nourish themselves from death. And we can even see them foraging, perhaps for mushrooms, an example of nature turning death into energy. The followers trust that nature will give energy back from death in abundance. And to look at the ancestral followers, they certainly don't lack in abundance. The majority of item descriptions referring to the ancestral followers mention death, life, or the power from death. This is not only passive or received from nature, it is active. The description of the winged greathorn states it is made to reap the lives of those who experience no sprouting. Reap meaning cut or gather a crop for harvest. Once again, a sense of the power of life from death. And what of the remarkable object of their faith, the ancestral spirits? How deeply are they connected to life from death? Before even meeting these creatures, we have to follow a ritual of pillar lighting. As we move through the area, we light a fire at the base of pillars. Flame, an energy that almost seems alive.
Right, so yeah, dwelling arrows don't say that they use ghost flames specifically. They do physical and magic damage, but I'm pretty sure like spirit flame is probably going to do physical and damage. So yeah, the scaling is different. Causes frost buildup. Bruh, what's going on? Alright, and then this one does not cause frost buildup. Okay. So I was just misremembering like what arrow was called what. The dwelling arrows are used by the ancestral followers, whereas spirit flames are used by the Band of the Fallen Hawkfolk. No relation to Griffith. Yeah, thank you, Vextra. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt, but I do believe that's true. I think I did like mess around with some of the arrows to test out some of the settings. Alright.
Sprouts once we light a basin filled with what looks like bones, a life from death. The pillars have oil at the top of them, and what is oil but the perfect representation of energy from death? It is also no accident that these monuments themselves are very like a horn. This symbolic power from death lights the tip, not unlike a horn sprouting with life and glowing. Once we have lit the pillars, we can go to meet the ancestral spirit itself. Not the young one, a dead skull with the potential of sprouting and power, life from death, but...
And one of the wilder things to me about those things are that it's called like spirit water, something like that, and yeah, I feel like there should be more to that that's just not explained super well or not elaborated on that much. Maybe there's some relation to like the oracle bubbles, but who knows?
A mature one. But of course we do not meet it at first. Instead, we meet its remains. A corpse. Death. We touch these remains, around one of which the ancestral followers sing and worship. In order to go and meet the ancestral spirit full of life, we must first touch death. As we
And apologies for like pausing and so all that stuff so often. The other thing that might be worth considering is that because the ancestral followers do keep distance from the purview of the Erd Tree, they might still be influenced by the kind of old style of death, even though the Rune of Death has been removed, perhaps. I don't really fully buy that. I do think that they're kind of made spiritually immortal by the Rune of Death's removal, but nonetheless, I think the reason that they're able to exist in like this spiritual form is because they're not being sucked into the roots of the Erd Tree. Hey, Taylor Machoni, welcome to the stream. Nice to have you. Ancestral followers eschewed metal and letters but love to burn oil. Gonna see an ancestral follower in a Ford F-150 rolling coal in the DLC? Yeah.
Interact, the body gives off a spiritual energy, and the air glows with it. We are transported by its power. But this is only the first example of the magic of death in a truly remarkable boss fight. On entering the Ancestral Spirit's domain, we are reminded of its name. It is the Ancestral Spirit, not the Ancestral Deer. It seems to be less physically alive and instead spiritually alive. Walking into the room, we see on the floor around us life literally sprouting from death. There are countless sprouting fungi, new life born from plant and animal remains. The next feature of the room that strikes us as embodying the life and death cycle are the spirit animals that roam, whose power will come into play during combat. And then we fight the ancestral spirit itself. Unlike the spirit creatures at its feet, this creature is much larger and more powerful than its remains. During the intimacy of the fight, we can see the ancestral spirit up close. It is powerful, but its appearance is an appearance of death. It looks skeletal, a much larger version of the dead remains used to get here. It even looks like it has been gutted or dead long enough that lots of what wasn't skeletal has rotted away, its chest cavity now hollow and open. In attacking us, it displays even more of the power it draws from death. And as the drama of the battle continues, the spirit animals remain uninterested. But if we manage to bring down the ancestral spirit substantially, it then uses its power to draw the surrounding spirit animals' energy into it. The spirit
Yeah, this is one of my favorite attacks in the entire game. It's really kind of a pain in the ass trying to get this thing to do it and get good footage of it. So kudos to Hawkshaw for, honestly, the cinematography throughout this entire video. It has been very much on point and something that I've noticed and appreciated.
spirits fall down, dead. And yet, the power of these spirits does not die. Their energy enters the ancestral spirit, revitalizing it. Its horns glow with power and its HP recovers. In development, its horns would have grown physically after drawing in their life, but this was cut for release. But this is not all. Life from death comes again later in the fight. The ancestral spirit can suddenly, and confusingly for the player, seem to die. It cries out in pain, while its legs crumple beneath it and falls to the floor violently. It is a death animation, and yet in the end, this spirit creature does not seem to need this body. It emerges from another spirit animal in the boss room, killing it and bursting forth from its body. Its new body manifests in front of us, expanding and growing in the air. Its limbs sprout out with a gruesome sound effect. There is power from death, and
Oh yeah, Titan, you bring up a good point that inadvertently you kind of do. You mentioned the mushroom worshippers, and I didn't even think about them as like kind of remnants of another civilization, because we really don't have their trace remains around either if we wanted to compare them to like Hawkshaw's comparisons of the other civilizations perhaps. But then you said maybe there's a link between the followers and the mushroom worshippers. They both seem to like life from death, and you think the poison orb spell looks similar to the winged axe Ash of War. Poison orb spell. What spell is that? I don't remember. I don't use a lot of the poison stuff. Nectarine, welcome back. I think I saw you earlier, but I didn't say it. Oh, it's enemy exclusive? Okay. Great Lords of the Scarlet Rot continuing to almost not exist in the lore. I know, right?
yet, is the original beast truly dead? For this power from the previous beast's soul is not only its vitality, the actual nature of the beast is now within the ancestral spirit. It attacks differently depending on which beast it has emerged from. and even more eerie. Even its cry alters to sound more like the beast it has become a part of.
Wait, I need to rewatch that. I didn't know it had different attacks based off of what it came from.
Within the ancestral
Below me.
vitality, or this power from the previous beast's soul is not only its vitality, the actual nature of the beast is now within the ancestral spirit. It attacks differently depending on which beast it has emerged from, and even more eerie, even its cry alters to sound more like the beast it has become a part of.
Huh. Dude, these are really good observations, yeah.
All of this, however peculiar and mysterious its mechanics, is the life and death cycle, life and power from death. With the regal ancestor's remembrance, we can get the ancestral spirit's horn. It shows the same beautiful glowing and sprouting that lit up the antlers of the ancestral spirit during the fight.
Yeah, Morlor said it has different attacks based on what creature it comes from, and the Regal version is way different from the regular version. Yeah, I know that it was different, but I just thought it had like more attacks. I didn't realize this was part of it.
Description says that a number of new growths bud from the antler-like horns of the fallen king, each glowing with light. Thus does new life grow from death, and from death one obtains power, the horn of the ancestral spirit.
And yeah, this is kind of where I think... Sorry, let me rephrase this. This is where I get the idea of the Erd Tree kind of absorbing all of the souls of the dead and kind of amalgamating them into something that could potentially create the Elden Beast. There might be a little bit more to it, maybe a little bit less, who knows, but I do think there is a parallel and a kind of plurality between what's going on with the Erd Tree versus what's going on with this ancestral spirit, with the way that it just kind of absorbed in the souls or the soul energy of the spirits here. So just the difference is, are you getting sucked into a root or sucked into an antler, essentially?
The center of their worship perfectly captures the ancestral followers' philosophy of life from death, and even clearer than the description is its function when equipped. If we kill enemies, it restores our focus points.
Right.
This was the first episode in our two-part series diving into the ancestral followers. If you enjoyed the video, then make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications to make sure you don't miss part 2.
Wait, I'm not subbed? Okay. So yeah, I actually like this video. I'm going to go ahead and link it into chat for you guys. And since he reminded us to like click the bell and stuff, I may as well remind Bella to click the bell so that way she doesn't miss more of these streams. The Hornhammer says it's blessed with the power of an ancestral spirit, but that one recovers HP? Okay. Yeah, I think it's probably like a two-pronged things. What is my Alban Orc blood clot equivalent item description? Also, how dare I? How dare you? So I don't remember, does Smotown just get triggered by it, or does he think like that's the best one? Because a description doesn't really... Well, that's not true. Anyway, I'll say that my favorite descriptions in terms of like the importance of lore is number 1 is soap, number 2 is golden poo. Don't miss part 2. You like the ancestral followers, don't miss their shots. Yeah, okay. Does this imply that the ancestor spirit and the ancient serpent of Gelmir are old opposing forces? Maybe. Alright, so now we'll move on to part 2.
Welcome to part 2 of our dive into the Ancestral followers. You can watch part 1 here. Parting from the ancestral spirit and back into the wider world, we find one curious piece of evidence for the life and death obsession of the Ancestrals. A lone ancestral follower in the Lake of Rot. A vestige of a group of ancestral followers who were at one point planned to be Rot worshippers. This group, removed from the final game, demonstrates the flexibility of appearance and natures in the world. Change your nature, your order, and your appearance can change rapidly. We can also see this in content that did make the final cut, such as with the Blood Albinaurics. However, more importantly, the Rot Ancestrals show how central life from death is to their beliefs. As long as this essential tenet is maintained naturally, other manifestations of worship that include it are possible. Rot is necessarily life from death, and we may see it even in the uncut boss room. As Rot embodies power from death in a natural manner, the ancestral followers could easily branch towards Rot and worship it. So this is...
Yeah, and that just ties back into Poison Armament and Poison Mist. I may as well actually read it for you guys out loud rather than just saying it. So let's go ahead and pull up my spreadsheet here. Alright, so Incantation of the Servants of Rot, blah blah blah. Those who dwell within poison know rot all too well. The death that begets life equally, that is to say, it is the cycle of rebirth put into practice. So yeah, I do think there's a lot of potential connections to be made between the ancestral goings on and the Rot folk. Titan says, Rot is life from death, but there is no death right now, so mark down another L for America's actions indeed.
One of the two pillars of the Ancestral's philosophy. To understand it, we could explore the game itself and nothing else. However, so much of the DNA of Elden Ring is a product of many previous sources, because a worship of life-death cycles, and of antlers, is not unique to Elden Ring. There are a wealth of inspirations that the creators of Elden Ring have definitely drawn from. So, in order to shine a brighter light on the mysteries of the Ancestrals, and to help us explain the other core pillar of their society, their unique spiritual magic, we will look at some of the inspirations we believe were involved in their creation. The first inspirations are so broad that it could be taken from many of the players themselves, and our passion to maintain a healthy world. Because as we ride across the lands between, we can often see pollution. Whether it is worm faces, poison swamps, or the fading of the land itself, the world is clearly not in good health. And if it's the Erdtree Society that is primarily damaging the world that it's a part of, then departure may become a necessary choice, and the Ancestrals may have left it to try to counter this imbalance. Another likely reason they may have left is freedom. Autonomy is a theme across From Software games. Everyone from individuals to large groups, to even those in power, all have to make sacrifices. From the toiling Bok who sacrifices his time and energy to aid his master, to even the current ruler of Leyendell, keeping up appearances to avoid his society rejecting him. It seems everyone must make sacrifices to uphold the systems and beliefs of society. And this can, in Elden Ring, just as in our world, become stifling. It can feel that it becomes so costly, and perhaps more costly as society advances, that it is no longer worthwhile. It can feel that this sacrifice has no payoff, and all turns to ash. And the sacrifices for order in Elden Ring are much more consequential than in the real world. So too are the risks much greater to those on the wrong side of what is accepted in a society. Over the long history of Erdtree Society in Leyendell, there must have been many who wished to leave. The ancestral followers just carried it to fruition. Another is the simple call of nature. We are sure everyone can relate to a desire to escape the mundane and return to the beauty of nature, let alone in the lands between. The attraction to nature has been felt by members of ordered society for as long as society has existed. Many feel this today, and certainly the artists and designers at From Software must feel it too. They are far from the first to express this appreciation and desire for nature in the artwork they make. Some have gone even further, acting upon it in the real world. Myth, legend, and history are rich with examples that must have influenced From Software in the creation of the Ancestral followers. Many come to mind easily. One of the first inspirations to do so are the Amish. Rather like our take on the Ancestral followers, the Amish haven't always been separate from society. Originally from Switzerland and from only the 16th century, this is a very well-known example of a people who decided to turn away from modernity.
I'll be honest, I was not expecting the Amish comparison to the Ancestral followers. If anything, I would say like the Native Americans are probably the more easy example, but in the broader context of things, I can see where Hawkshaw is trying to go with this, with the fact of them kind of eschewing, not letters per se, but more modern technology and things like that. Taylor McConey said, this probably isn't the focus of the stream, but you always figured that Empyreans appear when the Greater Will wants a change in the Order. Yeah, I don't really know about that, because it's a little bit curious if an Empyrean would still be an Empyrean even if they aren't chosen by the Fingers, which I know is a little bit of a controversial claim, but I feel like that just might be like a legitimizing of something, but they might not truly need to be chosen by the Fingers, with like Ronnie discarding hers.
As opposed to an ancient people who maintain their traditions alongside modernization running parallel to them. They forego many aspects of society, as we know, but an important part of many Amish groups is that it is vital to live in harmony with nature, to live a lifestyle that is self-sufficient. The next story to jump into our minds, and others who we discuss this with, is another true one. It is the story of Christopher McCandless, a young man with a desire to depart from a modern American life that he felt was inauthentic.
And didn't that bus essentially like kill a bunch of people because they kept getting stranded the hell out there and like getting riggedy wrecked by nature?
Desire to depart from a modern American life that he felt was inauthentic. He sadly met with some harsh conditions in the Alaskan wilderness, and faced with relative inexperience in the crafts required to survive, he died. This was adapted into the popular book Into the Wild, which was adapted into a famous film of the same name. Christopher McCandless has since become known the world over as part of a story about searching for freedom and authenticity, as well as a cautionary tale about the danger of entering nature unprepared. Sometimes the attractions of nature are strong, but if you don't want to leave things totally up to nature, then you might be helped by this video's sponsor, Manscaped. Manscaped offers the best kit for sorting out the zones that let a master hunter know you are upwind: your body, your butt, and your twin iron balls. Manscaped dropped us a bunch of stuff from their all-in-one Perfect Package 4.0. First is the Lawnmower 4.0
What's wrong, Clownscomb? You don't want to hear about the perfect package?
Manscaped skin-safe technology ain't no sorely diluted Golden Order generation tech. It reduces nicks and cuts on the most sensitive regions of the body, as though it was truly guided by the magic of runes. Also included are 2 products for those who worry about the...
Colo says, you can become the vessel of the frenzied flame, but it might be a special case. I don't actually know if you're still the vessel, or like, maybe this is like a Matryoshka doll, or whatever they're called, like a nesting doll, where you have the fingers in you, and then the fingers, well, you really kind of delete the ring at that point, don't you? So I guess it's kind of a moot point. Huh. Anyway. Shave your stimulating boluses, follow Elden Ring gamers. Cursed.
The fading of their lands between. The crop preserver ball deodorant.
No wonder why this is the freedom segment of the video.
Simply apply the crop preserver after your shower for all-day body odor protection. The crop reviver is a convenient spritz with cooling aloe vera, the technical name for dew-kissed herba, to quickly refresh the area whenever you need it. For a limited time, you can get all this plus 2 free gifts: the Shed travel bag and the Manscaped anti-chafing boxer briefs, and free international shipping by
the Manscaped boxers for your preserving boluses.
Using our promo code Hawkshaw or clicking the link below. The perfect helper for anyone hoping to become Ancestral. But what about truly ancient cultures? Many of their myths, beliefs, and rituals involve life and death, which is to be expected. What is more surprising is just how often they focus on antlers. It seems to occur so naturally that we found similarities to the Ancestral's antler beliefs across history and across the globe. Perhaps this is because antlers do have something magical in them. Antlers are a remarkably unique and beautiful production of nature. This innate sense humans have of this magic, the wonder they inspire, may be why so many cultures independently worship them. One inspiration that can be found across the globe is an archetype we will call the Horned God. This is a supernatural being that is depicted as human or humanoid, but with horns. This horned god often embodies the same traits across cultures. They are often associated with the wildness of nature. They often represent, most fittingly for the ancestral followers, life, death, birth, and their cycles. An aspect connected to this is fertility. Examples of these gods are, of course, the Greek god Pan, who often has goat-like features and cloven hooves. Nature and fertility are some of his essential associations. Another is the Celtic god Cernunnos. Cernunnos also had antlers and was associated with the forest and wild animals. Amun, the ancient Egyptian god, was sometimes depicted with ram horns and was associated with creation and fertility. It is interesting that there is a universal worship across cultures and mythology, not just of antlers, but also of what the antlers and those who have them represent. It may not only be the magical beauty of antlers that causes this, but how they behave. Antlers grow and split, much like individual lineages spread and grow. Most deer shed their antlers each year. Even the great red deer of Scotland grows its mighty crown only in 1 year, and will grow it again the next. These innate qualities, the form of growth and life cycle of antlers, seem to have taken the human imagination to similar places across the world. A further recurrent myth and legend across cultures is one that we will call the Wild Man.
Yeah, Kolo, you bring up a good point that Mononoke Hime's Nightwalker also looks like the Elden Beast, if only a little. Let me just pull up a picture for you guys. For not everybody who may have seen this. What's it called? So, okay, this will be good enough. So for anybody who hasn't seen Princess Mononoke, there's a spirit kami god of the forest. This is kind of what it normally looks like. It has powers over like literally life and death, because it will walk up to a sapling that's growing. It will breathe on it. The sapling will start sprouting even more like vivaciously, and then it will immediately like start to wilt and die. So this just kind of shows its like supernatural powers. And eventually, when the day turns into night, the form of the god will begin to change, and it becomes more translucent, as though it has the cosmos within it. And it does kind of resemble the Elden Beast. So it's a good comparison. And going back to like saying that the regal ancestors are kind of like a parallel to the Erdtree might be apt if they could essentially become something like the Elden Beast. I don't know if they would ever truly progress to that point, but who knows? Maybe in a different kind of era where that was allowed. If I steal from another Miyazaki, it's not plagiarism. Yeah. Got the same name, right? Taylor thinks that the reason the Empyrean stuff is annoying to them is because of the throwaway line of Placidusax's god fleeing all of a sudden and then never being brought up again. Yep. The DLC will fix it, guys, right? The DLC.
This myth is of a man who rejects society and departs into nature. Once in nature, he adapts and becomes in tune with the natural world. In some myths, he eventually develops mystical powers and may be able to talk to animals. This basic structure of the myth also repeats, of course reflecting a deep desire in people for departure into nature held across time and culture. And this desire naturally translates to story, and thus it has many unique examples in many cultures. One inspiration that's a Hawkshaw favourite is a late 14th century chivalric romance, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, one of the most famous Arthurian stories. The Green Knight in question is described as having branches and leaves growing from his head and body. Though the ancestral followers have yet to experience the sprouting of buds, we can't help but imagine that the Green Knight was something that inspired Miyazaki. In this legend, the Green Knight challenges King Arthur's knights to a game in which he allows them an attempt at cutting off his head with an axe, on the condition that he can return the blow a year later. Gawain takes up the challenge. Although he is suspicious, he does it to prevent risking Arthur taking up the challenge. Gawain puts all his might into his blow, and lops the head of the Green Knight clean off. The headless body then stands, picks up the head, and says he will see Gawain in 1 year. Perhaps this connection between humans and plant life informed the creation of Elden Ring's world, or at least the role of headlessness. So in myth, this concept of the power of life and death, and the force of nature coming through humans in sprouts and horns, begins to take form. Even in the USA, a more modern...
Yeah, one of the weirder things about the Headless Mausoleum dudes is that it's unclear if being headless is what cursed them so that way they could avoid destined death. But in general, there is some weird connection between being headless and avoiding death in the lands between. And this is actually represented on all of the catacomb mausoleums that have like the heroes' graves, where they'll have let me just type it in. On top of them, these gigantic statues of a headless man or being carrying a corpse of somebody like reaching up to the sky, and they're all facing the Erdtree for what it's worth. And so it seems like the headless one is left behind to help guide the dead to where they need to go, because they're like literally cradling them in their arms and whatnot. So here's the Gelmir one, and is very clearly facing the Erdtree. Don't dragons technically predate the humans, or are the beastmen separate from humans like apes? It's woefully vague, because we don't know why Marika and Godfrey are the form that they are. Obviously, Marika is kind of Newman, and so can the Tarnished be, but it's unclear whether or not the Newman as like humans kind of predate dragons and all that stuff as well.
Country, there has continually been history involving a return to nature. Less than a human lifetime after the country's creation, developed under totally new principles for a society, Henry Thoreau decided he would leave. He said farewell to this young society, for a time at least, to live in nature by Walden Pond. publishing the book Walden some years later, which recounted his experiences. The desire to return to nature was shared by those who came after him, and his book only served to inspire them, just like spreading and branching buds. In more recent history, there have been two return to nature movements that swept across the US in the 20th century. The first, called New Agrarianism, responded to the economic hardship of the Great Depression. Urbanization and corporations had failed them, so many returned to the older ways of the countryside and a more sustainable way of living. Later, in the 60s and 70s, the Back to the Land movement was another large departure from cities. Many saw it a natural response to a society they viewed as materialistic and that moved them away from an authentic life. Both of these movements held Walden as an important source of inspiration, which was also one of the few books Christopher McCandless took with him on his journey to return to nature. One of the greatest inspirations we have found is a myth that is found in many countries, and despite its uniqueness, it seems many cultures invented this legend independently, the legend of the Green Man. Its strongest roots are in European folklore, specifically from Celtic and Germanic tribes. In this myth, the Green Man was associated with the cycle of life and death, growth and fertility. Once again, this matches well with the ancestral followers. But his story is even more peculiarly similar. The basic legend is that a man becomes disillusioned with modern society and departs to live in the forest. Over time, he becomes more in tune with nature, hunting and foraging to survive. Eventually, he grows horns on his head, becoming a symbol of the wildness and freedom he has found in nature. Finally, as he becomes more and more one with the natural world, leaves and vines grow from his skin and flesh. We find the Green Man depicted everywhere, in artwork and literature, carvings and churches, represented as a powerful and mysterious figure embodying the raw power of nature. His transformation has been associated with the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. We can find the Green Man carved in stone across Europe, his features and expressions made of leaves. This is especially interesting as a lot of the beliefs implied in the legend of the Green Man are pagan, yet the stones that we find these medieval carvings upon are Christian churches. Christian churches across Europe especially, but particularly common in churches in England, France, and Spain from the 11th century onwards. They are mostly carved in the form of foliate heads that incorporate leaves, flowers, and other plant elements. Many famous characters and creations have likely been inspired by the Green Man, such as Treebeard and the Ents in the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. There are even many inspirations for worshipping an antlered stag, and even wearing their antlers. The Celts, who lived in Europe during the Iron Age, believed that the stag was a sacred animal that represented fertility and the renewal of life. They would wear antler headbands during religious ceremonies, including the Beltane festival, to honor the stag. The Pueblo people of North America have used antlers to fashion headdresses for hundreds of years, and in many cultures, including Native American cultures, antlers are seen as a symbol of virility and masculine power. This theme of virility is continued in Norse mythology, where the god Freyr was connected with fertility and the regeneration of the natural world, often depicted holding antlers which symbolized his connection to the forest and the cycle of life and death. Indeed, even beyond mythology, the association of fertility seems to naturally be attached to deer and antlers. This idea is symbolized very often in Japanese art. The cycle of life and death and the process of rebirth is paired frequently with antlers. They are often, and especially interesting for Elden Ring, depicted in proximity to trees and their branches, as though this reflects the similarity in their branching links, or perhaps the shedding that trees and antlers carry out seasonally.
Yeah, I was going to say, if antlers shed annually, it makes a lot of sense that they would become symbols of rebirth, because they fall out and then they come back. And that's kind of similar to the whole iconography that's associated with snakes the world over. And it may be why a snake can never die. I don't know why I said it like that. That's an awful right card. I should have practiced or fully committed to the bit.
We see in many paintings deer symbolically close to or under trees. The branches of the trees can reflect the position of the antlers, often almost intertwining with them. However, to access the spiritual religion of the Ancestrals and their spiritual magic, we need to get into the inspiration of their faith, the ancestral spirit worshipping faith. What is really being worshipped during the worship of deer and of antlers? Our own world may hold the answers yet again, and a clue may be found by looking at the purpose or payoffs of matching real-world ceremonies. What exactly are their practitioners carrying out?
Don't know what their practitioners are carrying out, but apparently my right card just sounds like a freaking old Jewish woman from New York. That's all I gotta say about that.
There is a Navajo ceremony called the Blessing Way. This is a ceremony that is performed to prepare and bless a woman during pregnancy, and to ensure the safe delivery of the baby. There is singing, chanting, and often gathering in a circle to emphasize the interconnectedness of all things. Another ritual practiced by Native American tribes, some among them being the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes, is the sun dance. At the center of the ritual is a pole instead of ancestral remains, but there is still singing and chanting around the center, and the goal of the dance is to connect with the spirits and bring healing and renewal to the community. The Navajo and Pueblo tribes perform the corn dance, where they stomp on the ground in a circle while chanting and singing to the spirits of the corn. The ancestral followers stomp new sproutings into the ancestral spirit, which, while a different form of growth and harvest, is still through spirit, like the corn dance. The Yoruba people of Nigeria perform the Bata dance. This once again invokes spirits, and the dancers wear shoes with bells and stomp on the ground in a rhythmic pattern, while drummers play music and singers chant. So it seems these rituals are working to imbue people and plants with energy, simply through the spiritual power of dancing and chanting. Also, and very importantly, a pattern is developing around spirit, and a connection to spirit through these rituals. What of spirit connections and antlers in the real world? In fact, in many cultures, antlers are seen as a conduit for spiritual energy. Antlers themselves connect to spirit. In some Native American ceremonies, they are used to access the power of spirits. In the Lakota Sioux tradition, the medicine man wears an antler headdress during healing ceremonies as a symbol of spiritual power. The Navajo tribe also uses antlers in various animal ceremonies, such as the night chant and the mountain chant, as a way to connect the spirits. In the Ojibwe tradition,
I do feel like this is slightly overlooking that many of these tribes are more animalistic in nature, so there's a lot more direct worship of the animals, and part of the reason for these kind of ceremonies and dances is typically done to make amends for going and killing a living being and taking its flesh for consuming it. And so many animalistic cultures would perform these kind of ceremonial dances or other acts, other rites, to kind of appease the spirits of the slain, and so that way they didn't anger the gods and essentially wreck their livelihood by like pissing off like the deer god, the antler god, whatever you want to call them, and making their source of food go away. And so by like appeasing the spirits, it would allow like life to continue uninterrupted, despite them literally interrupting life by taking another life.
Antlers are used in the Medewawin Society, a spiritual organization that is responsible for passing on the teachings and traditions of the tribe. Antlers are not just a symbol of power, fertility, and life. They are seen as reaching up and connecting with spirit. And once again, this spirit connection for antlers is across countries and mythologies. The Sami people, who are indigenous to northern Europe, have traditionally worn antlers on their heads during certain rituals and ceremonies. They believe that the antlers give them the power to communicate with the spirits of the forest. One particular tribe that may be the most likely to have inspired From Software is the Ainu people of Japan. The Ainu people of Japan were not a group who left mainstream society of Japan, but rather have tried to keep to their traditions alongside modernization. With Japan having a less diverse population than some other countries, and with the Japanese government's historic approach to smaller populations in Japan, it has been a challenge for the Ainu, to say the least. To put this in perspective, the Ainu were only officially recognized by Japan as an indigenous people in June 2008.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the Ainu are kind of like the equivalent of Aborigines in Japan in terms of like the way that they're treated. Yeah, let's just say that historically speaking, it was not good. TM.
The Ainu people have a deep spiritual connection to nature. Many of their traditional beliefs involve animism, the belief that all living and non-living things have a spirit or soul. The Ainu also venerate deer, and even in the modern day, we can see the reverence towards antlers. The Ainu have also traditionally worn antlers on their heads during certain rituals. They believe that antlers have a spiritual power and can help them communicate with the gods. More than that, antlers had a deflecting power too. They can ward off evil spirits and protect you from spiritual harm. And the treatment of the Ainu people may also be mirrored in the ancestral followers, not just their practices, where the Ainu have suffered from marginalization in Japan, constantly having their territories infringed upon, and so have become more and more cautious in their dealings with the prevailing Japanese society over time. So too might the ancestral followers have become more and more focused on staying away from the purview of the Erd Tree. More and more we see antlers connecting with spirit, even across the world, accessing spirit, communicating with spirit, and the examples continue to show it. The Tlingit people of Alaska would wear headbands during spiritual ceremonies
Okay, I get the point.
to enhance their spiritual power. The Sioux people of North America believed that the antlers of the deer had a special power to bring them closer to the Great Spirit. They would wear antler headbands during religious ceremonies to enhance their spiritual connection. The Evenki people of Siberia wear antlers as part of shamanic rituals. They believe that the antlers allow them to connect with spirit. The Cheyenne people believe that the elk is a messenger from the Great Spirit. And what about during the hunt? Certain Native American tribes, especially those in the plains regions, such as the Cheyenne, Comanche, Crow, Blackfoot, and the Lakota, which is the example we use here, were known for their expert use of the bow and arrow, and their spiritual connection to the buffalo they hunted. They believed that the buffalo were sacred animals, and that the hunt required a spiritual connection and reverence for the animal. Hunters would often perform rituals and prayers before and after the hunt to ensure success and to show gratitude to the animal for giving its life to sustain the tribe. An idea that is taken beyond a sense of faith or feeling in the real world to a tangible magic in the world of Elden Ring. The Inuit people of the Arctic have used caribou antlers for thousands of years to, once again, fashion headbands. They also believe that the antlers have spiritual powers and that they can help them communicate with the spirits of the forest and the spirits of the animals that they hunt. This belief of a spiritual connection and even permission between hunter and quarry is a common one. The Ainu also believe in a spiritual connection to the animals they hunt, that the animals have souls, even that the hunter needs to ask for permission from the animal's spirit before hunting it.
We're almost
Hunters
at the next
would use
segment.
charms and amulets to help them connect with the animal's spirit and to ensure a successful hunt. So with these insights from beyond the game, in the real world, we can return to the ancestral followers and see that their rituals are likely centered around tapping into spirit. And with this greater understanding, we can unravel the mystery of how the ancestral followers almost never miss when using the bow. We have already established the concept of the spirit connection the ancestral followers have with what they are hunting, but that's a belief that already frequently exists in our world. We have noticed that the arrow glows, but if we look closer, we can see this glow is in specific places, at the point of the arrow and up the shaft, and at its fletchings. If we then look at the arrow without it being used, and from the picture in the item description, we can see that these glowing parts are the parts made from animals, specifically what has been taken on the death of an animal. A sharp tooth seems to be the point, and fur runs from the feather fletchings up and around the arrow. The name and indeed the description can help us even more here. Dwelling arrow, an arrow in which the spirits of small animals are thought to dwell. Finally, as they draw the bow, the arrow seems to draw in spirit from its surroundings, spirit energy that is absorbed into the arrow. The arrow seems to already be in flight before release, much more than the Ash of War mighty shot achieves when we attempt it ourselves. It's as though the arrow is already moving towards us in essence. This is how they are so good. They aren't an archer playing by the rules of tension, air, wind, and eyesight. They are using the power of soul.
Do the dwelling arrows track when we use them by any chance? I'm kind of curious if they have that effect. But honestly, his story right here actually reminded me of something, of a story that I have of being in elementary school when Pokemon was still the brand new hot thing on the streets, Gen 1, where a friend and a mutual friend were battling during lunch, and it was going down to the wire. They were each down to one Pokemon. My friend had Raichu against the opponent's Zapdos, so, he was in a little bit of dire straits, and the other guy, Zapdos, used Fly, and he would definitely kill the Raichu on the next turn. So my friend, he uses Swift, and when it gets to the next turn, Swift goes out, hits the Zapdos, and kills it. And my friend just jumps up out of the seat and he goes, "It never misses! It never misses!" And so he's just like screaming, losing his crap, because he killed the Zapdos that is still technically in the air, because the description of Swift says it never misses. So that's kind of what that reminded me of with these ancestral followers never missing with their arrows. So yeah, if you guys need some Gen 1 pro battling tips, Swift never misses. Yeah, Swift is spirit energy, exactly.
And only after coming to this conclusion from the evidence did we find the description of the Ash of War enchanted shot. Archery skill that enlivens the arrow with spiritual essence. The resulting shot will fly faster than regular shots and change its trajectory to follow the target. The arrow is made to seek our soul, to follow it. Physical dodging is sluggish compared to spiritual accuracy when a soul seeks a soul. The ancestral followers are master hunters because they have a soul connection with their quarry. They take time to imbue their arrows with soul power. Then, when hunting us, they tune in to our soul, imbue the soul of the arrow with a seeking desire, and let spirit do the work. The spirit arrow turns and seeks us, leaving a trail of spirit in the air before disappearing. With the soul connection, the arrow flies with its own will, which is very similar to many soul-seeking magics across Elden Ring and the Souls games.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, homing soul mass, crystal homing soul mass, pursuer's life gets drawn towards life. Even, like, spiritual life.
This experience is compelling evidence of the spiritual power of antlers and soul. As we said before, it is not their strength, it is spirit, further shown by how the enchanted shot retains its power over distance, unlike the mighty shot. To begin unraveling even deeper mysteries of their spiritual magic, we need to look at the window to the soul in Elden Ring, the eyes. This is a very important part of them we haven't yet mentioned. The Ancestral followers' eyes are bright blue. Other than perhaps a slight touch of green, their eyes are overwhelmingly bright blue. This colour, as we have established, is strongly connected with spirit. It is also linked to intelligence and the mind. This blue is very familiar in-game, especially because of sorcerers. However, while the Ancestral followers and sorcerers both have access to this spirit power, it is clear the Ancestral followers use different techniques. The description of the Ancestral follower Ashes says that they are versed in distinctive spiritual arts, but we don't need this description. It is plain as day that they use totally different methods to access this power. Sorcerers in Elden Ring study, read, and think. We can find them doing this in-game in various locations, often in peculiar ones. They celebrate erudition. They use their intellect to pierce the power of spirit. Their reasoning is extremely conscious, and they put it to work during long sessions of lonely rumination.
So now I'm just imagining the Ancestral followers doing the erudition gesture.
This consciousness runs against the stream of the way things are, the natural order. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to engage it in this way. There is a desire to understand, but ultimately to manipulate, to use the power of the mind to create change. And thus, sorcery is often seen associated with alteration, transgression, and exploitation. Sellen may go to more extreme lengths than what other sorcerers are willing to do, but she is not counter to her culture. We know many sorcerers have an unnaturally long life. Many have altered their forms. Renala uses the amber egg. We know that they tap into the power of stars, that Radahn holds back their motions, that the soul is used as a vessel. They have even changed their very souls into primal glintstones, and the description shows that it is not only Sellen who has done this. And while this is soul-related, it is interfering with the natural order. It is using the intellect to achieve a perceived improvement from the way things are. This is clearly incredibly different to the principles held by the Ancestral followers. They have humility when faced with how things are. They do not wish to alter nature because they do not believe they can outdo nature or have authority over it. The Ancestral followers access the power of spirit using a different way. They seem to be totally instinctive in their spiritual practice. To use a Dark Souls example, their sorcery is more like Ulaseel's than Vinheim's. They are accessing spirit more through intuition, through feeling, through a natural connection. After all, in the lands between, everyone is connected to spirit. Rather like their connection with nature, the Ancestral followers are simply refining and deepening this connection.
And I am really curious as to what lives don't cause sprouting or don't lead to sprouting, as it's mentioned in the one, I think it's like the axe description. Because that's something that's like been on my mind for a very long time since I read that.
They use this connection alongside chanting and rhythmic rituals to tap into the spirit energy in a natural way. They are more like sailors using the wind rather than a propeller-driven boat. They are expanding the banks of an existing river or creating a channel for it to flow, instead of using a dam. They don't merely use the tools of their body, voice, and souls. They use the relics of corpses that have a connection to spirit. They wear horn charms and horn headbands that can channel spirit power. These antlers innately have these properties, and so are still in line with nature. It is very like a natural crystal focusing natural light when compared to a lamp. except in the lands between it is horns that achieve this spiritual focusing. We can see the ancestral followers harness spirit from the aura of blue during their dances and rituals. The ancestral remains give off this same blue. This blue is in the miasma of spirit energy cast by the ancestral infant's head. And of course, very present in the ancestral spirit boss fight. It also lights up their arrows, the arrows that almost never miss. Let's look at what exactly is at play here and try.
So I've wondered whether or not this kind of a spiritual water is potentially related to what you get in like the consecrated snowfield caves, specifically like the spirit color snail cave. Let me pull up some footage if I can. Maybe this will be good enough. So yeah, in these caves up here, there is like this kind of spiritual water. Maybe it's not actually spirit water or whatnot, but there is this water, and you can find like the spirit color snails in this area. Although to be fair, like not every area with the spirit color snail has like this water around it. The Halig tree being one notable example. The stock wolf sound. So I've wondered whether or not some of the snail calling spirits got their powers from like being infused with the waters in that area. But again, I don't know how that would exactly work with the Halig tree. Alright, going back to the video.
To solve the secrets of their spirit magic. If we look carefully at their rituals, we can find more insights into their spiritual art. For example, it seems that it is only shamans that sing during their rituals. The normal ancestral follower warriors only stamp in rhythm. Similarly, the shaman has a different headband, one with many peaks, that also glows with spiritual light. Interestingly, the normal ancestral warrior headbands, while only possessing 2 points, do glow when a ritual is being carried out. The normally dull horns become bright blue as they stamp and the shaman sings. In fact, there is a further difference. The shamans seem to give out spirit energy. This energy moves in waves as though filling the area. Yet the normal ancestral warriors, though it is more subtle, gently draw spirit energy into them. Even after the shaman stops singing, the horns continue to glow for some time before fading again, though we see clearly that their active absorption of spirit energy stops the moment the shaman stops singing.
Okay, so if it's related to the singing, that's interesting. Which I kind of wonder if it's kind of related to the principle of the mausoleums ringing bells or something along those lines, which gets brought up a lot in other FromSoft games, like Bloodborne especially. But anyway, hopefully I can show this off. The 1.0 version of the Goofy Shaman. Let me turn it up. So they just have like this really weird noise that they make. And I wonder if I have anything from the Lake of Rot easily available. Maybe not. Okay. Maybe this will do it. Yeah, so this is the 1.0 version of the Lake of Rot with all of the ancestor followers. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit. So that's like the weird like croaking sound that they did. Why did I have my HUD on? Probably because I didn't care. And then I turn it off there. Oh, probably because I was just worried about the item. I don't remember if the Scorpion Stinger is actually there in retail. Okay. Anyway, that's enough fun with that.
This shows that it is more than a simple access of energy, like we might think of electricity. This spirit energy is connected to relations. There is another thing that is intensely spiritual that we only find near the ancestral followers: the blue balls of lightning. They glow with the same colour as the ancestral's eyes, and they seem to be autonomous, sentient. These sparking bubbles are almost definitely associated with ancestral followers.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with that. I think it's supposed to be more of like a consecrated snowfield thing. And for the record, I do think this area in the Shifa River may have actually been connected to the consecrated snowfield at some point in the lands between history. Partially because of stuff like this, but also because like the trees over here in the background also appear in the snowfields. So let me just type in tree. Do I not have it? All right, let me look in a different folder. All right, so this is obviously the consecrated snowfield. We've got like these tall trees. They show up by like Mogwin and whatnot as well. And then here's Shifra, similar style trees, just in general. So I have wondered whether or not all of these areas were connected at one point, and whether or not the mountaintops were connected with Kaled as well, in the whole like Pangea type theory. They're called wisps in the game code for what it's worth. Okay. Yeah, I think these things also have like ice coming off of them, so I think it's supposed to be like a relic of being up there. Lightning like the dragons. Yeah, they have like blue lightning, so it seems like frost lightning, although I don't think, yeah, these don't inflict us with frost, so maybe it's different from like the dragonkin soldiers.
Because the only two locations we find them in are also very clearly where we find ancestral followers. And interestingly, the sparks do not seem to electrocute the ancestral followers. Since they are spirit channeling, one might say that they are in tune, that they are with the current of the river. They are not zapped because they are much more in balance with the sparks, where the player is clearly offsetting the natural balance. Does this spirit energy in the bubbles seek life as the spirit energy in the arrows does? Once they give off their power, they disappear, like Torrent or Rani. The next most important thing
that was a really weird connection right there.
Looking at their spiritual art is the ancestral spirit itself, the focus of their faith. Remember the importance of its name, the ancestral spirit. Remember that during the fight it goes on to gain extra power from other spirit animals, which are not of a physical form. And in the cut content, its antlers would have grown as it drew spirit into it, perhaps showing the process at work. But very importantly, it seems that as well as drawing up this essence, the ancestral spirit can distribute this spirit energy too. It is all about relation, and distribution is one of these relations. Just look at the remains which constantly give off spirit energy. The other word in its name is ancestral, which we have already established is about relation, not time. It can be ancestral because others can join it in relation. The antlers are very like a family tree. So this beast and its antlers are not only a divining rod, but a great system of distribution, withdrawal, and maintenance. The ancestral followers' soul arts seem to be a channeling and a focusing of the natural soul and souls in all of nature. The ancestral spirit is a being whose antlers can act as a divining rod, and can also enable the holding of souls in relation through sproutings. It becomes an ancestor via this relation, if not literally in the sense we hold in our world.
So, I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch. I definitely understand where he's coming from, though. But I do want to emphasize that the ancestral followers aren't like literally the descendants of the ancestral spirits. They're just kind of followers of them. So, it might be a little bit of a stretch, but I guess like if you want to compare it to the whole Erd Tree analogy with drawing in souls and like blending them together, there might be a little bit of overlap, thematically at least.
Push and pull of spirit takes life, gives it, renews it, and brings power from death. We see them channel this spirit into the growth of horns of the king of their society, and also of plants. In the north, we find them carrying out their ritual, and much more than anywhere else, there are rhymed crystal buds sprouting up. These buds are frozen by the cold, but it is life that emerged from the ancestral followers channeling energy. The design of these buds shows it growing from a dead branch.
I'm going to need to back up because I don't think it actually says that. Let me get rid of the captions. Young plant frozen into a crystal before it could mature. I believe these appear in places other than with these folk. So I'm not sure if this is correct.
Energy. The design of these buds shows it growing from a dead branch. Life from death, with spirit channeled through this relation. And while they have not grown buds from their flesh yet,
and it might be a little bit unfair to only show like the frozen ones when you could show like the blood ones and the crystal ones that are like in Liurnia.
Fur Raiment says that they hope for new buds from their flesh, and indeed their souls. For perhaps the most important thing.
Morlor asks where else do they appear then? I'm pretty sure, and I might be wrong about this, I would need to double check. I think some will appear in like the first section of the Blizzard area by the Red Wolf of Radigan, but I might be misremembering. All I'm saying is I don't necessarily know if these rhymed crystal buds are directly connected to the ancestors or if this is just kind of an incidental discovery. I might be wrong here. I don't actually remember for sure.
Is the spiritual flourishing of their society. Before we tackle...
Yeah, and part of the reason why I'm doubtful of the ancestral connection is because it's not like we have ancestors down in like the lakes of Liurnia where we get the crystal buds or whatever they're called, or like the Miquella-watered sacramental blood dew, whatever they're called.
The deepest lore that applies to the whole world of Elden Ring, we have some mysteries we need help with. Why are some ancestral followers spirits, and some physical? When they are physical, their blood is red, but when they are spirit, why is their blood white? Could it imply the relation of their spirits to time?
Those would technically be bloodless, why their blood is white, I think. But I think you can technically still bleed them, which is a little bit weird. I think I might have footage. Or maybe I did it not with that in mind. A little bit ironic when they can have golden eyes. Alright, cool. They didn't screw it up. So it does have like pure white blood. And part of the reason why I tested sleep is, if I remember correctly, you lose FP while you sleep. So I was just testing like different status effects and whatnot. The buds are found in Karya Manor as well, but you don't know if they actually grow there. There's a lot you can find on corpses. Okay. Yeah, so there is like the frozen rhyme bud on like the Alban Orc in the what's it called, Academy Town, which I wouldn't count as like being related to the ancestors or ancestral worshippers or whatnot. Which let me like try to rephrase that so I'm not saying that. Like the ancestrals could have potentially still like grown the thing that the Alban Orc eventually came in possession of. I'm just not entirely convinced. Let's see it. That's Alban Orc Village. Okay, here we go. The rhymed crystal bud, yeah. So I don't necessarily think this would contradict the whole ancestral spirit angle, but thanks for reminding me about this one. The Lord's apparition can also be slept, and that guy is literally an illusion. Wait, which Lord apparition? Are you talking about Goldfree? They do grow in Caria Manor? Okay.
Why is a red wolf of Radagon found down in their domain? Why did they cut the rot version of the ancestral followers, if only to have one roaming down in the rot lake? Did they not have time? Or have they moved the timeline of these rot ancestral followers into the future? Which might make this ancestral follower a scout, about to discover a whole new form of power from death, and will then
funny.
lead some of his own onto a new path. What on earth is worn around the shaman's neck? It looks like something that would be left by a creature from June. It presumably came to the world like that, as it seems complete, and the ancestral followers do not make much changes to their bone or antler jewellery. Perhaps the teeth of this creature grew in layers, shedding and regrowing, and is therefore a good embodiment of the ancestral's beliefs. And finally, if the regal ancestral spirit exists beyond the purview of the Erd Tree, then how and why is its remembrance hewn into the Erd Tree?
So that's a good question, and my explanation of that is that it's probably a function of the Erd Tree to be given power and whatnot through conquest. So that's why I think, let me look it up, over time. I always forget what the verbatim terminology of this is. Embodiment will help. Okay. Which one is this? Protection of the Erd Tree. So protection of the Erd Tree says, in the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erd Tree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order. And one of the reasons this one fascinates me in particular is that it implies that the Erd Tree was not always the embodiment of order. And with that being said, why would war make it become the embodiment of order? Obviously, when you don't have any enemies left around anymore, you're going to be the head honcho. So that much is kind of easy to take for granted. But I think with hewing, carving the remembrances of greater champions and lords into the Erd Tree, it is essentially integrating them into the system of the Erd Tree. So that might have been why there were so many like hero catacombs given Erd Tree burials. So that way they could be preserved or like brought into the fold of the Erd Tree's inner workings. And that might also be why in the Hero's Rune it said, let me just type in rune. There were once heroes who walked the battlefields abundantly blessed by the Erd Tree itself, who upon earning their honor simply died. So there was a period in the Lands Between when things died and they were still blessed by the Erd Tree, which is just very fascinating to me, which does lead me to believe that death was still part of the Erd Tree's existence initially, and later on, death got removed, and that kind of preserved the Erd Tree as it was, and all the things kind of relating to death in the lands between becoming stagnant after that fact, which could tie into Hawkshaw's idea of the ancestral spirits being a later addition, or like kind of a moving away from the Erd Tree because they like still worshipped death. But that also just depends on his interpretation of the timeline there. Maybe in time there was a power vacuum, and like in the present time, there were factions vying to create their order. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, because if they had control of the Elden Ring, why weren't the laws of the Elden Ring like governing the entire universe? Well, I think they kind of were, but at least with Marika and Godfrey, their manifestation of the Elden Ring's powers was represented through the Erd Tree, and the Erd Tree may have required the souls of the dead to get funneled into its roots so that it could grow or whatnot. But that's a fair bit of speculation on my part. So I think with Godfrey continuing on a campaign of war after they'd already like beaten the giants, it's really strange to me that like they beat the giants, they kind of ushered in the age of the Erd Tree, but he still kept on warring. My initial question was like, why? It may have been so that way he could literally force everything to become subjugated by the Erd Tree. But again, that's speculation there.
Finally, let's focus on the lore of the Ancestral followers that has a profound impact on all the lore of Elden Ring. Now that we have looked at the Ancestral followers' culture and practices deeply, we can break through to insights that have an impact well beyond this group, that lead us to a deeper understanding of the rules of the world as a whole. The Ancestral followers, despite living a distance from the Erd Tree and rejecting its society, still drop runes. Gold flows out of them and into us when we defeat them. Now, we already know that gold is an inherent property of the world. Gold existed before the Erd Tree and before the Greater Will worshipping faith. But the fact that gold comes out of the Ancestral followers is important. It shows that gold, to some extent, is involved in life regardless of belief system, just as all colours seem to have their own associations and properties regardless of the culture. And, despite renouncing letters, runes still emerge from them on death. It therefore would imply that runes are as inherent as colour, spirit, life, and so on, or that their existence is, now at least, as irremovable as it is possible to be. The Ancestral followers seem to not use the power of runes, or manipulate the world with the power of letters. But it seems as though runes are a fundamental part of the world and are inherently connected to it. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Much like runes in Norse.
Yeah, and that's always a fun thing to think about when considering the idea of runes in the Elden Ring, especially because there is that kind of implicit connection with Christianity and God literally being the Word. So, somebody had said something. Billy Caldwell says, you don't think that's true, right? Gold seems to have come with the Elden Stars or the arrival of the Elden Beast. So, I understand the confusion. I think it might have just been the way that like Hawkshaw worded it. He wasn't saying that gold arrived with the Greater Will. He said the religion of like worshipping the Greater Will, which is a little bit different. So gold and stuff could have already existed in the lands between, and like the worship of it could have come up later. So yeah, because I almost paused the video then, but I was kind of paying attention to how he worded things. Taylor always read that Godfrey and Marika as like the Erdtree being the start for them, and then they became the front runner for Top Dog, and they secured their position with the rest of the wars to dissuade other groups. That's what I thought for a very long time as well, but I think the idea of carving the dead into the Erdtree is probably something that was integral to how the Erdtree like operated, and I think that might have been why like Colosseums were a thing, why like war was such a big thing, Erdtree burial was a thing, and why snakes were hated, because snakes would probably absorb something full before it could be fully integrated into the Erdtree. And part of the reason why I say that is because of why Rykard says you'll be joined together as family if you get consumed by the Great Serpent. It leads me to believe that it wouldn't allow a soul to go someplace else after it was consumed by the serpent. Hey Mortis, nice to see you. How'd the raid go? Elden Enthusiast thinks similarly to Hawkshaw, with the word being the one manifesting itself in the form of the runes, perhaps in all things, and from the one great equals the one. Okay. Hey, Beans and Rice got the Moonlight Greatsword in AC6. Congrats, man. Tony thinks the Crucible was the physical manifestation of the Helfin. I have wondered that as well. It would be nice if we had like more candle tree style designs in the depictions of the Erdtree, like anywhere, but we kind of don't. So while I really, really like the idea, I just can't fully be on board with it, unfortunately. Okay, you guys got Crota? Nice. Nice. Got the Triumph too, sweet. Hey, Metal Fingers, welcome back in. Alright, going back to the video.
Nordic mythology, runes in Elden Ring are truly magic. There is one fine difference between the Ancestral followers that, while subtle, is important here. Those who wear the two-pronged horns do have bright blue eyes, as we have mentioned, but the shamans, who wear a headband with many buds, do not have the same eye colour. Their eyes are a more neutral colour, light blue sometimes, and sometimes grey or perhaps silver. This is already interesting, but is in fact the beginning of what might be a deeply profound distinction. The next thing revealed on close examination is that on the Shining Horn headband there hang discs of metal.
Yeah, I noticed that earlier, and I wonder if they're just supposed to be like shells, but either way, they definitely do look metallic.
For people who have given up metalworking, this is an interesting choice. Perhaps it is a naturally occurring example of metal. But what is most interesting is why it is there. What does it represent? Another disparity to notice is behaviour, as well as a difference in the motion or behaviour of spirit energy during their rituals. It is only the shamans who sing. When no shaman is present, there is silence broken only by rhythmic stamping. Another difference is how they respond to our presence. The shamans are less aggressive than the warriors, and they have a much smaller area in which they will attack. During their rituals, with their eyes closed, they almost seem to be in a trance, perhaps shared by the warriors. So profoundly connected to spirit that they are much less aware of their mundane surroundings. Though when it comes to it, these shamans are definitely capable of aggression. In fact, on proper testing, they are extremely strong. They are bigger and even more tanky than the warriors, with higher HP and resistance. They can also use the Ancestral Infant's head to channel a life-sapping spirit miasma. Yet, despite all this power, they are not armed, and are not quick to anger. Even once we attack them, they do not go for all-out offense, preferring to cradle the precious Ancestral Infant head in one arm, like a precious child, while buffeting us back with the other. All of this taken together gives a clear sense of divided roles. And one more obvious observation that we have yet to mention is that these two roles are divided another way. The shaman are female, while the warriors are male. Similar separate roles are present in the Erdtree society too, and while they may have more complexity here, it is certainly telling that these two cultures share this feature, given their history. The next discovery that the Ancestral followers give us is best discussed with a question. What is the importance of a consort? Why does Marika need an Elden Lord? Why does Rani need us for her new order? What does Mog steal Mikola for? In general, there seems to be an essential relationship between a king and a queen.
So this is something that I've been thinking about a bit more recently. We've had some discussions about it on the Discord as well. Join the Discord. Oh, I forgot to plug it. Or forgot to pin it. Anyway, it's in the video comments, or video description. So, with the idea of brandishing the Elden Ring specifically, like the Japanese term for it is kind of interesting because it could be used in a kind of physical sense, or it could be meant in a more metaphorical sense of upholding something rather than brandishing. Like, honestly, my first inclination of what it meant to brandish the Elden Ring was literally like the way that Link would hold up the Triforce in like the older Legend of Zelda games. So like, to me, like the Elden Ring is kind of like the Triforce, because I mean, come on, it looks like it. Sort of, but so something like this, but instead of triangles, it's just rings. It's got the three triangles up top, or like the triangle design of like the three intersecting things, plus another one in the middle. There we go. But anyway, brandishing can be meant in a more metaphorical sense, or like as like upholding. So are they upholding the Elden Ring? And if so, what does that mean? For Godfrey and Radagon, it might mean upholding the ideals of their order. So Godfrey may have continued to conquest to bring everything and integrate it into the Elden Ring and the Erdtree. Radagon could uphold things by like keeping things in stasis, perhaps. It doesn't really matter. And even the Tarnished can kind of be like the hired muscle to help instantiate the order and keep things as they are. So that might be the role of an Elden Lord, but I don't really know. That's just kind of one tentative idea that I have that might actually give us like more insight as to what they do, but who really knows? You don't think she needs us any more than like a president in general? What were you thinking about brandishing? The Elden Ring. You know, just don't brandish in public, because that's like at least a misdemeanor, right? Hey, Nothingness, welcome back. And Necropolis, I don't think I said welcome. And Billy, nice to have all you guys again. You feel like the player's relationship with Rani mirrors that of Marika and Godfrey to some extent? Both queens needed conquerors and war times. You're not optimistic about our future? Yeah. That's one potential reading that I have. You don't like being a replaceable goon for someone else to be their god?
A ruler and a consort, or even a god and their king or queen. The Ancestral followers seem to show that this too is an essential aspect of the world, and not just a whim of certain gods or omens. The distinct roles are...
Yeah, Crunchy said, maybe the Elden Ring is a set of principles, but they have to be enforced by a lord. Godfrey brandishes the ring by espousing Marika's order, i.e. killing the giants. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, but yeah, obviously my ideas are subject to change, especially when the DLC takes us to Londor and fixes everything.
Are divided by gender with the Ancestral followers, but we don't know if this is a rule as such. Though for the orders that we know have existed in history, there has been a queen and a king consort. Additionally, there is something else that is essential in Elden Ring: having a maiden. Regardless of what body type the player chooses, they are always met with the same cruel phrase, from Vare.
You are maidenless.
What is it in Elden Ring that women can achieve or have been chosen to perform that men cannot? The finger readers are female, the Nox society seems matriarchal, the Glomide Queen is female. While this could be coincidence, it does seem that the importance of women, or the female role, is something essential in the world of Elden Ring to access certain domains of power. Returning to the shaman's eye colour, perhaps the paler blue or more grey or silver represents this channeling of life. We can see her channel and send out spirit power in her rituals, sending it out of her. Spirit moves out and away from her, where it is absorbed by the hunters. The shaman's differences seem to centre on the quality of life-giving. If we look closely at her shining horn headband, we cannot help but be pushed to the concept of a tree and fruit. Again and again, the similarity of antlers to branches has been made in art, history, mythology, and in Elden Ring itself. Branching, sprouting, fertility, ancestry. With the hanging medallions that seem to be silver, if we think in terms of Elden Ring, it makes us think of life.
So instead of like a Manscaped sponsorship, he should have taken it in Ancestry.com or like 23andMe with these videos.
In fact, these pendants look an awful lot like silver tears. If the Erd tree bears the living out of its bowels, so too might the ancestral king bear out the new births of the ancestral followers, not from its boughs and branches, but from its antlers, via its own flow of life and soul energy, and not with metalworking, but as a natural process. This form of hanging also gives the concept of fruit, or buds, similar to the Scarlet Aeonia or the Erd tree itself. But the ancestral follower, beyond the purview of the Erd tree, is independent from it, and can birth its own. This leads us to the more general aspect of relation. Having shown that age is not important for the concept of relation or ancestry, with an infant ancestral head still being capable of being an ancestral spirit, we are left with a conclusion.
All things can be conjoined.
Therefore, the primary quality of the antlers is to unite, to channel, to relate and unify, all in a chain of relation. It would seem that Elden Ring emphasizes the importance and uniqueness of womanhood. And this is not surprising, given the history of the essential role women played as firekeepers in past games, or their essential difference in influence, power, and magic in Martin's work. Women may be deeply connected to the power of birth, even if they are somewhat removed from it in a traditional physical sense, and the ancestral followers clearly draw attention to this. The difference in their involvement in spirit energy is shown by more than just the shaman's eyes. The female ancestral follower is always physical. They are never in spirit form, unlike the hunters. Notice too the difference in horns, only 2 compared to many, as though the males were a peak, and the female was more the central bow, the nourishing force. The males draw the force and may then expend it, but the female may channel that power. They distribute it. If this was the case, then either one without the other is powerless, as both roles contribute in relation to an effective whole. Once again, the ancestral followers have found a harmony in relations, unlike Marika, who damages her order with imbalance, or Mog, who violently takes Miquella without his consent. Since that day, Mog has heard nothing from him, and the Mogwyn dynasty has yet to become a reality. The female, in some form, may be required for some aspects of birth or new life, and nourishment of that life. Perhaps these aspects of womanhood are a central and profound aspect of the world of Elden Ring, and are bound spiritually as much as physically. It may be that, in a spiritual sense, everyone has a mother, even those less traditionally born. The culture of the ancestral followers is working. It is something rare in the world of Elden Ring, but it feels like a group that actually has a bright future. While the ancestral followers may not have flourished to the size and scale of certain other subgroups in the lands between, they are young, and unlike so many in our world or in art, they have succeeded in departing from society. This is an incredible achievement, as nature presents a very steep learning curve. They have adapted, they have aligned themselves with nature, and their craft of surviving with nature is more than sustainable.
So yeah, there's a bunch of weird stuff that I wish we knew more about. First, I'll say, like, obviously the statues of the women with the urns, whether or not they're actually supposed to represent America or something before her, is questionable. But moving beyond that, just kind of like that idea of rebirth, or maybe not rebirth, but just kind of like birth in general, and all of that stuff tying to motherhood and or maidens is very fascinating because of the Tarnished's need for a maiden to begin with, even though like the Tarnished can still start out as a like female or like body type B or whatever you want to call it. Maybe there's supposed to be like a lore difference. I don't really know. So maybe it seems like the necessity of a maiden is more like a finger maiden, perhaps. But I guess like Melina isn't technically a finger maiden, so there's something weirder going on with that, which I don't know enough about for me to feel like comfortable making a lot of claims. I have wondered whether or not Melina being able to distribute runes into the Tarnished is kind of a more limited thing, and whether or not that's supposed to be reminiscent of the way Marika was said to bestow the Erdtree's blessings directly in the past. But moving beyond that, going back to the topic of like birth and whatnot, I've really wondered if there's supposed to be a relationship between like gold representing willpower and silver representing spirit, and a marriage of the two to create actual new life in the lands between, partially because of the things relating to like the land squirts and the land octopi specifically, because land octopi cannot reproduce without the blood of a human, and land octopi are technically considered a bloodless creature. So with gold existing in beast blood and, you know, by extrapolation, gold existing in human blood, I've wondered whether the reason that the land octopi need human blood to consume to reproduce is because they don't produce gold naturally of their own, and so they need to consume other things to reproduce. And that might be why like Miranda flowers drop what are they called? The arteria leaves, which absorb blood. So I think like blood equals gold essentially, and gold plus spirit equals like true life. And so if you don't have enough of either, life won't continue. And part of the reason why I say that is obviously Godwyn is dead in spirit, but I do believe his gold persists within his body, whereas Ranni is dead in body, yet she persists in spirit. Although I don't know why she continues to exist, because I'm like, where does her gold come from? Is that just like her being a demigod? It is a little bit messy, so I'm not like as strong a proponent of this theory as I'd like to be. No, as far as I know, there's no full translation document for Elden Ring's item descriptions. Or do you just mean like a text dump of both files, of like English and Japanese? Because we definitely have those. But yeah, if you're on the Discord, check out the Elden Ring resources channel, and you should be able to find that stuff pretty quickly there. Necropolis wonders if the octopi are alien in the lands between, kind of like how they're an anomaly in the world. Yeah, I've wondered that as well. But I'm not so sure, because we have like the land octopi, the land squirts, and all of the Miranda flowers as like kind of bloodless beings. Yeah. Okay, so if you want the text dumps, I'll go ahead and link the Carian archive. Because that one's pretty easy. So that's the Carian archive. I don't remember who initially made that, unfortunately, but if you go to that link and at the end of master, like type in JP in capital letters, you'll be able to get to the Japanese equivalent of that. So what you would need to do is like do a control F for a term and find the correlating ID between the English and Japanese for direct comparison. All right, going back to the video.
They have raised an ancestral infant all the way to becoming a king. They have proven their faith and have developed their own distinctive spiritual arts. All of this is a remarkable achievement for a group that turned away from a failing system to begin again on their own.
So yeah, I don't necessarily know if they grew their king to be that size, because like obviously its corpse is still down there, but they certainly do try, it seems, to cultivate more buds and whatnot, but I don't know if they actually continue doing that after the fact.
Even if we slay their king, they have others ready to rise up. They embrace competition. They embrace death. Their order is young, but think how many sproutings it might bear. How many connections. How many relations. Once enough relations have been formed, it is an answer to the life-death cycle. It can be its own order, and eventually a competitor to other orders. This gives enormous insight to other aspects of the Elden Ring world. For example, Godric may not be a sorely diluted, distant relation to Marika from time-related ancestry as we would think of in our world, but from his dilution of relations, from grafting. The ancestral infant head showed us that time is not the measurement being made, and it makes us reflect. If the antlers and its relations are much more flexible than in our world, what about the other connectors at the center of other orders?
So I would definitely disagree with the Godric comparison, because we're told specifically that he's the only non-direct child of Marika, and that he's a more distant relation in a kind of literal sense, although I don't entirely like hate that idea of him becoming made more distant through the grafting process, but anyway, I don't think that's too important. I'll let him finish out the video here, and then I'll say like a lot of other stuff.
The Erd Tree itself may not be so different. In fact, this similarity with the tree and its fruit is more than speculation. There is a reason they use the unclear word, buds. After all, are buds horns or plants? But this term was kept ambiguous because it is ambiguous. In classic FromSoft style, they hid the answer in plain sight. For if you look closely, the tips of the antlers are becoming leaves.
Alright, so this is definitely an interesting series of videos. I don't think the whole argument of the ancestral followers needing to come later really enhanced it, to be honest. I don't really think it's necessary. But to be fair, I do think it is important to question when things fall on the timeline rather than taking them for granted. So I can appreciate that aspect of these videos, even if I don't necessarily agree with the approaches used, if that makes sense. So with the ancestral followers kind of working in tandem with death, I think that makes more sense for them to be from an era predating the Erd Tree, or at the very least, the removal of the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. So that might be evidence to suggest that they're kind of ancient as well. But even if they did come later, I don't really think it changes too much in the grand scheme of things, although I think it does make it a little bit more awkward to talk about like the death-based beliefs of their religion, if we want to call it that. Kolo doesn't like how people laugh at Godric. It's just his way of leveling up. Same for Sellen, the Godskins, the Blood Knights. You want to see everyone beat the game with no level up mechanic? I mean, some people do RL1 runs, and I said doo-doo for Golden Poo. Anyway, okay. You wish there were more grafted enemies in the game. Godric is kind of cool. Honestly, like, Godric and the grafted scions are visually terrifying. So it's a little bit of a letdown that they're such early game bosses, because like the shock factor kind of like goes away pretty quickly, and then you never get anything quite like that. Which is partially why I would have really liked a system where like the world reacted to like what demigods you killed first. Because could you just imagine like Godric killing other demigods and like gaining their powers? That would be obscene. But anyway, we'll just like leave that alone for now. Yeah, the Royal Revenants may not be grafted, but they're super terrifying. They kind of seem grafted, to be fair. Yeah, but they're definitely terrifying. It sure is an ugly mechanic, but you can't judge him on that, for sure. Godric, but with Rykard as an arm. Like the full-on Rykard. Alright, so... Okay, we've gone through all the videos for today. I'll try to figure out what I want to watch for tomorrow. I need to add in some more videos. I want to watch like another video by Cosmos pretty soon. Maybe another one by Crunchy that's actually lore-oriented, especially with him lurking in the chat here and there. And all that fun stuff. So if you guys do have more recommendations for videos you want me to react to on stream, feel free to let me know in the video comments, because chat deletes them essentially, or in the Discord in like the channel feedback area, and I will add it to the list. But yeah, that'll be it for tonight's stream. Thank you all for joining me again. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next one tomorrow/tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. Take care. Stay safe. Last Protagonist out.